The Emu War, Australia's feathery battle. What happens when humans, with all their best plans and tools, come up against something as wild and ancient as nature itself? You might expect a clear victory for us, right? But sometimes, history shows us just how wrong we can be. This is the strange story of Australia's Emu War in 1932. Farmers in Western Australia were struggling, trying to build new lives after a big war. They had planted their crops, hoping for a fresh start. But then, thousands of emus, driven by drought, began to move. These huge birds invaded the farmlands, eating and destroying their crops. The farmers asked for help. So, the government sent soldiers, complete with machine guns. Think about that. Soldiers, meant for human conflict, sent to fight birds. It sounds like a cartoon. But for those farmers, it was a very real, very desperate fight for their livelihood. They aimed to protect their future, but the emus weren't fighting a war. They were just trying to survive, moving for food and water, as their kind had done for thousands of years. They scattered, they ran, they were hard to hit. It was like trying to scoop water from a fast river with your hands. You catch some, but most keeps rushing past. The soldiers found it almost impossible to control them. Here's the thing. This wasn't a battle of good versus evil. It was a clash of needs. Humans needed to cultivate the land. Emus needed to live on it. In the end, nature, in its quiet, persistent way, proved to be the stronger force. This strange war makes you wonder, doesn't it? It shows how our best efforts can fail when faced with nature's stubborn will. It's a quiet reminder that even when we think we're in charge, the earth often has the final say, teaching us a humble lesson. The Great Molasses Flood, a sweet disaster. Can you imagine something as thick and sweet as molasses becoming a wave of destruction? It sounds like a made-up story, but here's the thing. It wasn't fiction. On a cold January day in 1919, in Boston, a huge storage tank holding over 2 million gallons of molasses suddenly burst open. Suddenly, this dark, syrupy substance, normally so slow, wasn't slow at all. It formed a massive, sticky wave. This wasn't just a sticky mess. It was a true disaster. This wave, about 15 feet high in some places, moved incredibly fast, up to 35 miles an hour. It roared through the streets, tearing buildings and sweeping everything in its path. Horses, wagons, people. Imagine being caught in something like that. A thick, dark wall of liquid pushing and pulling, making it impossible to move or breathe. Think about spilling a whole bucket of thick pancake syrup on the kitchen floor. But instead of just being annoying, that syrup is now a powerful, deadly force. 21 people lost their lives, drowning or crushed by the debris the molasses carried. Many more were seriously hurt. And here's why it matters. This wasn't a natural disaster like a storm or an earthquake. This terrible event happened because of human error. The tank was poorly built, not strong enough. Warnings had been ignored. No one truly believed that a common sugary liquid could cause such immense harm. It leaves you with a heavy feeling, wondering how something so ordinary could become a nightmare. It reminds us that we have a serious responsibility when we build things, even everyday structures. Every bolt, every weld, carries the weight of safety. The cleanup was long and hard, taking weeks. The sticky goo got into everything, clinging to buildings and seeping into the ground. For years, people nearby said they could still smell molasses on warm summer days. It was a constant, quiet reminder that sometimes unexpected dangers can lurk in plain sight, born from human neglect. It makes you think about small details we often overlook, and the big consequences they can sometimes bring. Man who survived 2 atomic bombs. Have you ever thought about how some moments in history feel too wild to be true? This is a story that truly makes you wonder about fate and the incredible strength of the human spirit. It's about a man named Tsutomu Yamaguchi. In August 1945, Yamaguchi was on a work trip in Hiroshima. One morning, as he walked to work, something unthinkable happened. The first atomic bomb exploded above the city. He was only about 2 miles away, close enough to feel the blinding flash, the terrible heat, and the crushing blast. He was severely burned and temporarily lost his hearing, but somehow, he survived the immediate devastation. The city around him was a scene of pure horror. Despite his injuries, he spent the night in a bomb shelter. His first thought was to get home to his wife and child. His home was Nagasaki. So, he traveled back through the wreckage. Then, just 3 days later, on August 9, 1945, while he was in his office in Nagasaki, telling his supervisor about the nightmare he'd just lived through in Hiroshima. The second atomic bomb was dropped. It exploded over his hometown. Can you even imagine? He survived this second blast too, mostly protected by being inside. Think about the chances of being in one truly devastating event. Now, imagine being at the center of asterisk to asterisk such world-altering disasters, just days apart. It's like trying to imagine winning a strange, terrible lottery, not once, but twice. The odds are beyond what we can truly understand. It makes you wonder if the universe was cruelly testing him, or miraculously saving him. This story makes you pause and think about how precious life is. Even in the darkest times, the human will to keep going, to find family, and to simply endure can be truly astonishing. It makes you feel a deep respect for how strong people can be. The pirates who founded a nation. Have you ever thought about what it truly means to build a nation? It's not just about land, is it? It's about rules. It's about people deciding how they'll live together. What's fair? What's wrong? Usually, the people who do this are ones who follow rules, who believe in structure. But what if a nation, or something very much like one, was formed by the very people who famously lived outside all laws? Here's the thing. History holds stories of pirates, fierce and free, who didn't just raid ships. They built communities. They carved out their own spaces, often on forgotten islands. These weren't just temporary hideouts. Hundreds, sometimes thousands, of outlaws lived there. They created their own codes, ways to share treasure, and forms of justice. Think about that. They rejected kings and governments, sailing under the black flag, yet they still felt the need for some kind of order among themselves. It's a bit like when you and your friends decide to start a club or a team. You might all be super independent, maybe even a little wild. But if you want your club to work, you need rules, right? You need to decide who does what, how you'll settle arguments, and what your shared goals are. Without those basic agreements, your club wouldn't last. That same human desire for belonging and structure, for things to make sense, even when breaking away from the old ways, guided these pirate captains and their crews. So this idea reminds us that even in the wildest chaos, there's often a deep human longing for belonging and shared purpose. Even those who live by their own code often end up writing new ones. It proves that connection and a touch of order might just be something we can't live without, no matter how free we wish to be. It's a quiet truth about what it means to be human, looking for a place to call home, even on the high seas. A pope who tried to dig up his predecessor. Can you imagine being so angry with someone, so determined to prove them wrong, that you'd want to put them on trial, even after they'd been dead for months? Back in the year 897, a new pope, Stephen VI, held a bizarre trial. His target, the previous pope, Formosus. Formosus wasn't just on trial. His decaying body was dug up from its tomb, dressed in old robes, and propped up on a throne. This wasn't a joke. It was a serious, chilling event called the Cadaver Synod. Pope Stephen accused Formosus of dishonesty and breaking church rules. A deacon even spoke for the dead pope. Imagine, a silent, decomposing body, questioned by a living pope. This was a twisted way to settle old political grudges. Being pope back then was deeply tangled with power struggles in Rome. Less about faith, more about control. Think about it like this. When someone new takes over, maybe in a school club, and they try to undo everything the last leader did, change rules, tear down old posters. This event was like that, but taken to an extreme, horrifying level. Pope Stephen wanted to erase everything Formosus had done, to show he was never truly a pope. But you can't truly put a dead person on trial. Their spirit is gone, and their deeds are already done. So, Formosus was found guilty. His papal robes were stripped, his fingers cut off, and his body thrown into the Tiber River. It was shocking, even then, and sparked outrage. Later, Pope Stephen himself was overthrown and imprisoned. This reminds us how strong emotions like anger and the need for power can push people to do extreme things, even against the dead. It shows that sometimes our battles in life don't end when someone leaves this world. Their echoes can linger, pulling them back into the spotlight. What a strange and sad way for history to unfold. The London beer flood, a drunken wavy. Imagine a wave, not of blue water, but of something dark, frothy, and incredibly strong. Can you picture that? In 1814, a part of London experienced a flood, unlike anything before or since. It wasn't caused by a storm or a river overflowing its banks. Here's what actually happened. At a large brewery, a massive wooden vat, holding over 135,000 gallons of fermenting porterbeer, suddenly burst open. It was like a huge, liquid explosion. The force was so great that it knocked the stopper, out of a second vat. And then, one after another, other enormous vats also began to break. This wasn't just a spill. It was a powerful, dark wave of beer, up to 15 feet high in some places, that crashed through the brick walls of the brewery. Think about how quickly a small crack in a water pipe can flood a basement. Now, picture that scale, but with millions of pints of thick, potent beer rushing through narrow, crowded streets. The area around the brewery, St. Giles, was a poor neighborhood. Many families lived in basements and small, packed houses right up against the brewery walls. For them, this wasn't some strange, funny story. It was a sudden, terrifying disaster. The wave of beer swept away homes, crushed people, and filled basements in moments. 8 people died that day, drowned in the very substance meant to be a drink. A young girl, an entire family, vanished beneath the dark tide. It reminds us how fragile our daily lives can be. One moment, everything is normal, ordinary. The next, something completely unexpected, even absurd, like a flood of beer, changes everything forever. It's like when you're walking down the street, and a sudden, unexpected gust of wind tears your umbrella inside out, leaving you soaking. But this was much, much worse. It makes you pause and think about the sheer randomness of the world. How something so routine and industrial could become a force of nature. It's a quiet reminder that history holds not just grand stories, but also incredibly strange, deeply sad moments that teach us about life's unpredictable turns. The time America tried to buy Greenland. Have you ever wanted something so much you'd try to buy it, even if it seemed impossible? Not just a new video game or a cool pair of shoes, but something truly massive, like an entire country. It sounds like something out of a fantasy book, right? But here's the thing. America actually tried to buy Greenland, not once, but a few times. Imagine for a second, you're living your daily life, and suddenly, a powerful country decides they want to purchase the land right under your feet. This isn't about buying a plot of land for a new house. This is about buying a vast island, covered in ice and mystery, home to unique cultures and incredible natural beauty. It's a place that feels like its own world. So, here's what happened. Different American leaders, across history, saw Greenland as a key spot on the globe. They thought owning it would give them an advantage, especially during times when countries were worried about war or resources. They saw its cold, distant land as a kind of giant, unmoving aircraft carrier, or a secret treasure chest of minerals. It's like when you see someone with a really amazing collection of cards or comics. You might offer to trade for one or two, but imagine offering to buy their entire collection, their whole passion, their history. It makes you wonder, can you really put a price on something so huge and full of life? Can a nation just become someone else's property, like a toy? This story makes you pause and think. It's about more than just land or power. It's about the very idea of ownership. Does a place belong to those who live there, those who care for it? Or can it just be bought and sold by governments? It's a quiet reminder that some things, like the ancient ice and the resilient spirit of a place, might be too vast, too deeply rooted, to ever truly be owned by a transaction. Some things are simply meant to be. A war fought over a pig. Have you ever wondered how serious conflicts can start from something incredibly small? So small it seems impossible. This story might make you think differently about how history unfolds, and how easily peace can shatter. Imagine 1859, a beautiful island named San Juan, claimed by both the United States and Great Britain, a place of quiet tension, a border never truly settled. One day, an American farmer, Lyman Cutler, looked at his potato patch. There, eating his vegetables, was a large, black pig belonging to a British company. Cutler, fed up, shot it. You might think, a pig died. So what? But here's the thing. That pig wasn't just a pig. It became a symbol. It was the spark that nearly ignited war. British authorities demanded the farmer be arrested. American settlers refused. Soon, both sides sent soldiers. Warships sailed into the bay, cannons ready. Tensions grew thick. For weeks, soldiers stood staring, fingers on triggers, all because of one pig dot. It's like a small argument with a friend about something silly, like the last slice of pizza. Really, it's not about the pizza, is it? It's about feeling disrespected or unheard. That disagreement can blow up if no one takes a breath and looks at the real feelings underneath. The pig war reminds us how fragile peace can be, how one incident, a moment of frustration, can push us to the edge. It shows the wisdom it takes for leaders, and for us, to step back, to breathe, to remember what truly matters before a small spark burns everything down. The boy who became an emperor overnight. Have you ever wondered what it would feel like to wake up, and suddenly, everything about your life had changed? Not just a new school, or moving to a new town. Imagine your entire world flipping upside down overnight. History shows us this isn't just a wild dream. Sometimes, it's a sudden, heavy truth. Think about a kid, just like you, maybe worried about a history test, or what to wear tomorrow. Then, in a blink, they're told they're in charge of an entire empire. We're talking about a boy, often a teenager, who was unexpectedly handed unimaginable power. No training, no time to get ready, just one day, playing, and the next, ruling millions. It's like being in your school play, and suddenly, the main actor gets sick, and without any practice, they tell you to step onto the stage. Not just for one scene, but to direct the whole show, write new lines, and manage everyone backstage. The responsibility would feel huge, almost crushing. Right, now, picture that feeling, but multiplied by 1,000, for an entire country. This isn't just a story about power. It's about the raw, unfair hand fate sometimes deals. To be so young, with so much expected of you, to carry the weight of countless lives when you're still figuring out your own. It makes you think about how quickly life can change its course, and it shows us that sometimes, the biggest changes come when we least expect them, forcing us to grow up in ways no one could ever plan for. It leaves a quiet question. What kind of person would you become if the world suddenly placed its heaviest crown upon your young head? When animals were put on trial, have you ever wondered about fairness, about what justice truly means? It's a big idea, right? But what if I told you there was a time, not so long ago in history, when people took this idea so far that they actually put animals on trial? Yes, real animals, pigs, rats, even insects, appearing in court, with lawyers and judges, just like a person. It sounds strange, almost like a story from a dream, but it's true. For centuries, especially in medieval Europe, if an animal harmed someone or damaged crops, it could face a formal accusation. People weren't just angry. They believed these animals were truly guilty of a crime. Imagine a pig, accused of hurting a child, standing before a judge, its fate decided by human law. Here's the thing. This wasn't just random anger. It came from a deep, ancient belief that all creatures, in some way, were part of a larger moral order. People didn't fully understand animal behavior as we do now. So, when a pig acted aggressively, they might have seen it as malice, not just instinct. It was their way of trying to make sense of a world that often felt chaotic and unpredictable, trying to impose human rules where they didn't quite fit. They were looking for an explanation, for someone or something to hold accountable, even if it was just an animal. Think about it like this. When you see a computer glitch or an app crash, sometimes you feel frustrated, almost like the machine deliberately messed up. You know it didn't, but that first burst of annoyance feels personal. In a way, people back then were doing something similar, but with far higher stakes, trying to hold nature itself accountable. It makes you think, doesn't it, about how much our understanding has grown. We now know animals follow instinct, not moral laws. We see the world through a different lens, one that separates human responsibility from the natural world's wild, untamed spirit, and that's why it matters. This forgotten piece of history reminds us how we've struggled, and continued to struggle, to understand our place in the world, and to define what justice truly is. The dancing plague. People just kept moving. Have you ever had a song stuck in your head? The kind where the beat just loops and loops, and you feel like you could tap your foot forever. Now, imagine that feeling, but it's not just in your head. It's in your whole body, and you can't stop, not for days, not for weeks. That's kind of what happened in 1518, in a town called Strasbourg. It started with one woman, Frau Trophia, who just began to dance in the street. She didn't stop, for hours, then days, and here's the thing, other people started joining her, more and more. Soon, dozens, then hundreds of people were caught in this strange, unstoppable dance. They weren't dancing for joy. Their faces showed pain and exhaustion. Their feet bled. They danced until their hearts gave out, until they collapsed from hunger or tiredness. The town leaders tried to understand, was it a curse, a fever? People believed it was the result of hot blood, or maybe a punishment. They even built a stage and hired musicians, thinking that if people danced it out, they would get better. But that just made it worse. More people joined the frantic, endless movement. It's hard to imagine something so intense taking over a whole community. Think about a feeling of dread, or even just really bad stress, that won't let go. You know how sometimes worry can make your stomach hurt, or your hands shake, even when you try to calm down? This was like that, but it exploded into a physical command to move endlessly. What this strange event tells us is how powerful the mind can be, how fear, or a shared sense of unease, can twist into something real and physical. It reminds us that sometimes the biggest mysteries aren't about faraway galaxies, but about the very human body and mind, and what they can do when pushed beyond all limits. It's a quiet reminder of how fragile our sense of control really is. The man who jumped off the Eiffel Tower with a cape, have you ever really wanted to fly freely, like a bird? For one man, that dream became so powerful. It led to a true story, stranger than any fiction. His name was Franz Reichelt, nicknamed the Flying Tailor. In 1912, human flight was new and risky. Franz spent years designing a wearable parachute suit. He believed it would let someone jump and float gently down. He tested it, but it never quite worked. Still, he thought his invention was the key. On a cold February morning, Franz went to the Eiffel Tower, not for the view, but to test his suit. Friends warned him. Still, he climbed to the first platform, almost 190 feet high. Wrapped in his cape-like suit, hope and perhaps fear filled his eyes. He looked at the crowd. Then, he jumped. A moment of silence. His cape suit did not open. It just wrapped around him. He plummeted, fast and tragically, to the frozen ground. He didn't fly. He just fell. Here's the thing about big dreams. They make us do amazing things. They push us to imagine what's possible. But sometimes, our strong desire makes us ignore real dangers. Imagine building a tall tower without strong foundations. Without careful planning, it can end sadly. His story reminds us of the line between brave ambition and a leap that's too risky. His jump shows our human wish to conquer the impossible, our courage. Yet, it tells us we need careful steps. We all dream big. That's good. What matters is understanding reality, learning, and letting knowledge guide our passion. Human flight came true, but it took careful science and many small steps, not just one tragic jump. True progress needs patience, not just raw courage. The Great Stink of London, a horrible smell story. Have you ever smelled something so bad it made your stomach churn? Something that just wouldn't go away? Imagine that smell, but everywhere. Not just for a few minutes, but for weeks, even months. So strong it crept into every home, every office, every corner of a giant city. That's what happened in London in the summer of 1858. And it's called the Great Stink. Here's the thing. For hundreds of years, London didn't have a good way to get rid of its waste. People used to throw everything, and I mean everything, into the River Thames, which flows right through the city. It was the city's toilet, its garbage disposal, its everything. And then, a really hot summer hit. The sun beat down, and the river, thick with sewage and trash, started to essentially cook. The smell wasn't just bad, it was a physical force. It made people sick. Members of Parliament couldn't even stand to be in their own buildings because the stench from the river was so overwhelming. Think about leaving your lunchbox in your backpack for a whole week in the sun, then opening it up. Multiply that by millions, and you're getting close to what London faced. This wasn't just an unpleasant smell, it was a profound crisis. It showed how connected everyone in a city truly is, even through something as invisible as the air we breathe. People realized they couldn't just ignore their waste anymore. So here's what happened. This terrible, unforgettable smell forced Londoners to act. It made them build an incredible, modern sewer system. A hidden network that changed the city forever and saved countless lives. Sometimes, the worst problems, the ones we try to hold our breath against, are the very things that push us toward the smartest solutions, changing our world for the better, even if we never see the pipes underground. It's a quiet reminder that even something as simple as a horrible smell can shape history. The president who had a pet alligator. Have you ever thought about the things that just don't fit? The moments in history that feel less like a textbook fact and more like a story whispered around a campfire. Here's the thing. Sometimes, truth feels wilder than any made-up tale. It makes you wonder about the hidden corners of even the most important lives. Imagine, for a moment, the leader of a country living in the most famous house, making decisions that changed the world. Now, imagine him sharing that home with an actual, living alligator. This isn't a cartoon or a crazy dream. It's a real story about President Theodore Roosevelt, a man known for his adventurous spirit. His son Kermit once received an alligator as a gift, and for a time, this scaly creature, named Bill, lived in the White House. Sometimes he'd be in a bathtub. Sometimes, people say, he'd just roam. This small, strange detail tells us a lot. It wasn't just about a pet. It was about a time when life, even for a president, felt less buttoned up and more connected to the wild world outside. It shows us that even the most serious people have a side that's open to the unexpected, to moments of pure, bewildering wonder. It challenges our ideas of what's normal or proper in places of power. Think about how you feel when something completely out of place happens in your daily life, like finding a lost baby bird in your classroom, or maybe a tiny frog hopping across your kitchen floor. It stops you, right? You pause and think, how did that get here? That alligator in the White House was just like that, but on a grander, stranger scale. It reminds us that life often throws us these weird, beautiful curveballs. So, when we look back at history, it's not just about big dates and famous speeches. It's also about these quirky, almost unbelievable details. They whisper to us that humans, even those who shape nations, are complex. They are full of surprises, and sometimes their lives are much stranger and more wonderfully human than any story we could invent. And that's why these small, wild truths matter. They make history breathe. A general who was a dog. Have you ever wondered if the bravest among us always look like us? What if a hero, a true leader, wore fur instead of a uniform? History, in its quieter moments, sometimes whispers tales so tender and unbelievable, they reshape what we think is possible. In the chaos of World War I, there was a general who was, in fact, a dog. His name was Sergeant Stubby. He wasn't trained for war. He was a stray, found wandering a university campus by a soldier. But Stubby marched with the troops, snuck onto the ship, and ended up on the front lines in France. He learned to tell the difference between English and German sounds, sensing danger before any human. Stubby would bark loudly to warn soldiers of incoming gas attacks, saving countless lives. He'd even find wounded men on the battlefield, staying with them until medical help arrived. And, incredibly, he once held a German spy by the pants until American soldiers took over. For his courage, he was promoted to sergeant. This isn't just a fun story, though it is that. It's about how connection and instinct can be just as powerful as strategy. Think about your own pet, or maybe a friend's dog. They often seem to know when you're upset, even before you say a word, or they might perk up, sensing something outside long before you hear it. That's a different kind of intelligence, a deep awareness. Stubby showed us that heroism doesn't require complex plans or fancy titles. So here's what happened. This brave dog, who asked for nothing but a warm place and a kind hand, became a symbol of loyalty and incredible courage. It reminds us that greatness isn't just about human achievements or grand battles. Sometimes, the most profound lessons come from the simplest beings, showing us that connection, bravery, and a helping paw can change the course of lives, and even history, in the most surprising ways. And that's why it matters deeply. The shipwreck that saved a colony. Imagine this: you're trying your hardest, but everything is going wrong. You're hungry, tired, and ready to give up. What if, at that exact moment, the very thing that seemed like the absolute worst disaster actually saved you? History has these strange twists, and one of the most powerful stories comes from the early days of America, with the Jamestown colony. Back in the early 1600s, Jamestown was in big trouble. Settlers were starving, sick, and ready to give up. Their last hope was a relief fleet from England, bringing supplies. But then, a fierce hurricane hit. The flagship, the Sea Venture with leaders and goods, was torn from the fleet, smashing onto the reefs of a far-off, uninhabited island, Bermuda. Everyone thought they were doomed, shipwrecked. But here's the thing: no one died. Instead, they found themselves on an island full of food, like wild pigs and fruit. They had months to rest, recover, and build to new, smaller ships from the wreckage and the island's resources. This forced detour gave them something Jamestown couldn't: a fresh start, renewed hope, and supplies. Think about it like this. Sometimes your internet crashes right before you finish a big school project. It feels awful, like everything is ruined, but maybe that forces you to take a break, clear your head, then you come back, find a better idea, or fix a mistake you didn't even notice. That little disaster actually helped you do better. When the *C Venture *'s crew finally arrived at Jamestown, months later, they found the remaining colonists preparing to leave for good. Their arrival, with new food, new leaders, and a powerful story of survival, turned things around. It gave Jamestown the boost it needed. So, a shipwreck, a disaster that should have ended their journey, became the event that saved the colony. It reminds us that sometimes, life's biggest setbacks secretly carry the seeds of our greatest triumphs, if we only look closely. The inventor who tried to sell invisible ink to the FBI. Have you ever tried to hide something? We all know that feeling, the thrill of a hidden message, a mystery waiting. Invisible ink always felt like magic, didn't it? You're right, and the paper looks blank. Then, with a special light or chemical, words appear. It's like a secret language, but really, it's just chemistry playing tricks on our eyes. Imagine a man, in the 1930s, who thought he had the ultimate secret. He believed his invisible ink was so good, the FBI would pay a lot. So, he walked into their office, feeling proud, and offered his invention. He showed them, wrote a message, and it vanished. Agents might have been impressed. But then, one agent, A.H. Belmont, had a simple idea. He tried to reveal the invisible message himself. Nothing happened. He asked the inventor to show them. The inventor couldn't. Here's the thing. His invisible ink was so invisible, it didn't exist at all. It was just blank paper. He had simply pretended to write. This story makes us smile, but it also makes you think. Sometimes, we try so hard to be clever, to invent something amazing, that we miss the very basics. It's like searching everywhere for your phone, only to realize it was in your hand, or working on a hard math problem, and the answer was a simple step you missed. The inventor wanted to be important, to offer something unique, but his invention was just an empty space, a hopeful dream that never quite became real, and that's why it matters. It teaches us about perception, about how much we want to believe in something spectacular, but sometimes, the real truth isn't hidden away. It's in the plain, honest reality right in front of us. It's a quiet reminder that not every mystery has a deep solution. Some secrets are empty, some dreams never quite become real. The time a city had a secret underground tunnel system. Have you ever imagined a hidden world right beneath your feet? Like, not just a basement, but a whole secret city. Here's the thing. History holds stories stranger than any movie, and one of those stories is about cities that built entire secret lives underground. Not just tunnels for trains, but homes, shops, even places to worship, all hidden away from the light of day. Think about a time when the world above ground was dangerous. Maybe invaders were coming, or the weather was harsh, or even just life felt too uncertain. So, people in places like Derinkuyu in Turkey decided to build down. They dug, not just a little, but deep, carving out rooms and hallways like a giant ant farm. But for people, it was a way to survive, a way to keep their families safe, to hold on to their culture when everything felt like it could be lost. It's kind of like when you build a really awesome fort with your friends, a secret place only you know about. You feel safe there, right? You make up rules, share secrets. This was like that, but for thousands of people, and built to protect their very lives and everything they held dear. Imagine the quiet, the darkness, the feeling of being completely cut off, yet completely together. This wasn't about hiding bad things. It was about preserving good things. It was about courage and hope, even when fear was everywhere. Think of the whispers in those stone hallways, the shared meals, the silent prayers. Every person living there was part of a giant secret, a shared hope for a brighter tomorrow. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What parts of ourselves do we hide away, deep down, to protect? What secret strengths do we carry that no one ever sees? Sometimes, the most important parts of life, the things that truly matter, are found not in the open, but in the quiet, hidden places we build for our souls. The emperor who made his horse a consul. Have you ever wondered what happens when someone has so much power, they start to make choices that seem completely unbelievable? What if a leader could do anything, no matter how strange or disrespectful it might seem? There was once a Roman emperor named Caligula who pushed the limits of this idea. He had a favorite horse, a magnificent animal named And here's the thing, Caligula reportedly planned to make this horse a consul. Now, a Roman consul wasn't just any job. It was one of the two highest political positions in ancient Rome, like a president or a prime minister today. Consuls lead armies and run the government. They were supposed to be wise, respected men. So, imagine the shock, the confusion, the deep insult, when an emperor decided to give that role to a horse. It wasn't about the horse's ability, obviously. It was a clear, chilling message. It showed Caligula's disdain for the Senate, the ruling body. It was his way of saying, I can do whatever I want. Your traditions, your power, mean nothing to me. Think about it like this. Imagine if your school's principal decided to make their pet hamster the head of the student council. It would feel silly, maybe, but also like a huge slap in the face to all the students who actually care and work hard. It would make you question the principal's judgment and whether they respected the school itself. That's a bit of what Caligula did, but on a much grander, more terrifying scale. This story isn't just a bizarre historical footnote. It's a quiet reminder about the weight of power and responsibility. When someone holds immense authority, their choices shape everything, sometimes in ways that break trust and make a mockery of serious roles. It makes us think about how easily power can become dangerous if it isn't balanced with wisdom and respect for others. It shows us how fragile even the most important positions can become when leadership loses its way. The lost Roman legion in China. Have you ever wondered about people who vanish from history's pages, only to appear somewhere completely unexpected? There's a story, almost too wild to believe, of Roman soldiers traveling thousands of miles, not just to a new country, but a whole new world, ancient China. Here's what we think happened. Around 53 BC, a huge Roman army faced a terrible defeat by the Parthians in modern-day Iran. Thousands were killed or captured. These soldiers, a lost legion, were pushed eastward. History then simply loses track of them. It's like a single thread disappearing into a huge, tangled cloth. But over 150 years later, ancient Chinese records mention something strange. In 36 BCE, Chinese armies fought warriors using a fish-scale formation, a tactic only Romans knew. These warriors also built temporary wooden forts, just like Romans. Centuries later, in a Chinese village called Liqin, people with green eyes and lighter hair were found. Traits uncommon there. Could they be descendants of those lost Roman soldiers? Imagine being one of those young soldiers. You're from Italy, used to Roman ways. Suddenly, you're marched across deserts and mountains, thousands of miles, into lands no Roman had ever seen. It's like your entire life drops into a different dimension. Everything you know is gone. Your family, your home. How do you find your way? You adapt, learn new ways, blend in, becoming something entirely different. This tale isn't just about ancient soldiers. It's about the amazing human ability to endure. It shows us that even when you feel utterly lost, life finds a way. It reminds us every person carries their past, even when starting a new future in an unexpected place. The echo of that journey can still whisper across centuries, making us wonder about the quiet courage of those who simply kept going. The woman who pretended to be a man to fight in the army. Have you ever wanted something so much that you would pretend to be someone else to get it? Imagine living in a time when big dreams were often only allowed for one half of the population. For centuries, fighting in wars was strictly seen as a man's job. Women were expected to stay home, to raise families, to support from afar. But here's the thing, courage doesn't care about gender. Patriotism doesn't ask if you're a boy or a girl. Sometimes, a burning desire to protect your home, to seek adventure, or just to prove what you could do, became too strong to ignore. So here's what happened. Again and again, women cut their hair short, put on men's clothes, changed their names, and stepped onto the battlefield. They did this in the American Civil War, in ancient China, and in many European conflicts. They marched, they fought, they bled, right alongside men who never knew their true identity. It was a secret kept under a uniform, a silent rebellion against the rules of their world. Think about it like this. Imagine you love a sport, more than anything, but there's no team for you, no way to play unless you somehow sneak onto the boys' team and pretend to be one of them. That deep hunger to be part of the action, to contribute, that's a powerful force. These brave women faced immense risk every day. If discovered, they could face shame, punishment, or worse. Their lives were a constant performance, a silent plea for equality in action, and that's why it matters. Their stories remind us that strength comes in all forms. The human spirit will always find a way to break through limits. It shows us the quiet power of a person's will, when what they believe in is bigger than what society expects. It makes you wonder how many other incredible, hidden stories are still waiting for us to truly see them. How a lie about gold started a war can. A single lie, whispered and then shouted, really light the fuse for a whole war. It sounds almost unbelievable, doesn't it? Yet, history shows us that sometimes the most precious things, like glittering gold, can cause the most pain, especially when truth gets twisted. Imagine a vast land, rich with discovery. In the late 1800s, deep beneath the dusty earth of South Africa, an unbelievable amount of gold was found. This wasn't just a little bit. It was more gold than anyone had ever dreamed of, enough to make entire nations rich. People flocked there, hoping to strike it lucky. But here's the thing. Where there's immense wealth, there's often immense greed, and powerful people start to want what isn't theirs. The land belonged to the Boers, Dutch-speaking farmers who had settled there generations ago. But the British Empire, already a giant global power, saw the gold and wanted it. So, a narrative began to form, a story spun to justify their desires. The lie wasn't that gold existed. The lie was about why they needed to intervene. It was said they had to protect British citizens working in the goldfields, that the Boers were unfair, even cruel. These were not the full truth. They were exaggerations, carefully crafted excuses. The real reason, deep down, was the gold, pure and simple. Think about a rumor at school, maybe about a secret, super powerful item in a new video game. Everyone suddenly needs that item. Some kids might even start fighting over it, or spreading stories about who deserves it more. Even if the item isn't that special, or the stories aren't true, that intense desire, that belief in a fabricated need, can turn friends against each other. For the British and the Boers, this twisted desire turned into something far worse. It led to the Second Boer War, a brutal conflict that cost thousands of lives and left deep scars. It was a war born not just from the discovery of gold, but from the deliberate crafting of lies and half-truths, all to justify taking what another group possessed. It reminds us how fragile peace can be when powerful wants blind us, and how easily we can be swayed by stories that benefit a few, even if those stories are built on sand. The secret war on squirrels in California. Have you ever really looked at a squirrel, darting across a lawn, or burying its winter treasures? They seem so small, so quick, just a part of the everyday world around us. But can you imagine a time, not so long ago, when these tiny creatures were considered such a grave danger that an actual, organized war was waged against them in California? It sounds almost unbelievable, like something from a strange story, yet it was a very real, deeply felt struggle. In the early 1900s, California's growing population relied heavily on its farmlands. Farmers poured their lives into planting vast fields of wheat and barley, hoping for good harvests. But then came the ground squirrels. They weren't just a nuisance. They were like an army, tunneling through fields, devouring crops, and ruining livelihoods. Imagine working all year, pouring your sweat and dreams into the soil, only to watch tiny, hungry creatures destroy it all. It was heartbreaking, a quiet desperation. This was a battle for survival, for the very food that fed families. And the fear ran even deeper. These squirrels carried the bubonic plague. Yes, the same terrifying disease that wiped out millions centuries ago. So, this wasn't just about crops. It became a desperate fight for public health, a silent war against an invisible enemy, one that could claim human lives. It shows how quickly our view of nature can change. One moment, an animal is just part of the landscape. The next, it's a symbol of danger. Think of a tiny, unnoticed drip from a ceiling. At first, you might ignore it, but then it becomes a torrent, threatening to ruin your home. The danger, though small, felt enormous. It makes you think, doesn't it, about how our fears and needs shape our relationship with nature, how we decide what belongs and what doesn't, or what is friend and what is foe. Sometimes, the difference is just a shift in our perspective, or new knowledge about a hidden threat. Even the smallest creatures remind us how complex and fragile our place in the world can be. We are all connected, and every life holds surprising lessons about survival and fear. A library that only existed in one man's head. Have you ever thought about all the things your mind holds? Not just facts for a test, but memories, feelings, stories. What if someone could hold an entire library inside their head? This wasn't some trick. It was a real, living collection of knowledge. Every word and page, just stored in their memory. Sounds like a fantasy story, right? But history tells us about people who came pretty close. Imagine a scholar from ancient Rome or Greece. They had read thousands of books. Instead of needing shelves, they simply knew them. Every detail, every line, ready in an instant. It was like having whole libraries, entire universes of words, locked behind their eyes. For people in ancient times, memory was truly important. Books were rare and precious. So, remembering things well wasn't just a cool skill. It was how knowledge lived on. People memorized long poems, taking days to say out loud. Their minds were living archives. Here's the thing. When that person passed away, their internal library was gone, unless they had shared it. You know how you remember every lyric to your favorite song, or maybe every cheat code for a video game. You can picture a friend's house layout, even if you're not there. That's your mind making its own small library of information. Now, multiply that by 1,000,000, and you get the idea. It makes you think how amazing the human brain is, so powerful, but also kind of fragile. A library with no paper or ink, existing only in someone's thoughts, is beautiful and mysterious. It reminds us how important it is to share what we know, to write things down, and that's why it matters. We keep learning. Some stories are just too precious to only live in one person's mind, no matter how brilliant. The time it rained frogs. What if the sky opened up, not with rain, but something completely unexpected? Imagine looking up during a heavy storm and seeing small, cold, slippery frogs tumbling down. Living frogs, falling from the clouds. It sounds like a made-up story, or an ancient myth. But here's the thing. It has happened, many times, across centuries, for witnesses, long before science. This was more than strange. It must have felt like the world had gone mad. Imagine their fear, confusion, and deep wonder. They might have seen it as a sign from angry gods, a curse, or a miracle. Their minds struggled to find meaning in something so impossible, something that shattered every known rule. So here's what happened. Powerful like mini tornadoes over water, form over lakes and ponds. These strong winds suck up not just water, but whatever lives in it. Fish, tadpoles, even frogs. They carry these creatures high, sometimes for miles, until the winds lose power. Then, gravity takes over, dropping everything, often far from where they started. Think about a strong gust snatching your hat, or lifting a plastic bag high. Now, picture that same force, on a grander scale, strong enough to lift a whole pond. It's a powerful reminder of how immense and unpredictable nature's energy can be. This phenomenon, though rare, tells us something important. It shows how our ancestors faced mysteries we can now explain. Their struggle wasn't ignorance, but a testament to their deep curiosity, their need to make sense of the world. This is why it matters. It's a quiet reminder that wonders still defy immediate understanding, encouraging us to keep looking, asking, and staying open to a reality stranger and more beautiful than we imagine. The town that voted for a cat as mayor. Have you ever looked at the world, at all the big decisions being made, and just wished for something truly unexpected? Imagine a town where people chose a furry four-legged friend to lead them. This isn't a fairy tale. In Talkeetna, a tiny, beautiful town in Alaska, for over 20 years, their honorary mayor was a cat named Stubbs. Think about that. Adults chose a cat to represent them. Why? Maybe they were tired of the usual arguments, of promises that faded. Maybe they longed for leadership that was simpler, more real than politics. Stubbs, with his quiet purrs, became a symbol. He wasn't there to make speeches or solve problems. He was just there. His gentle, unwavering presence reminded them of home, of shared life, of purity. It speaks to a deep human need, a desire for connection and peace in a world that often feels loud and complicated. It's a little like when you have a favorite comforting item, like a soft blanket. It doesn't do anything, but its presence brings a feeling of safety and calm. Stubbs brought that same gentle feeling to his town. He was a silent guardian, a shared furry heart for the community. So, what does the story of a cat mayor teach us? Perhaps it reminds us that true leadership isn't always about strength or cleverness, but about a shared spirit. It's about finding unity in something unexpected, a gentle presence that brings people together and reminds them of the quiet beauty in simply existing. Side by side, it's a tender thought. The softest pause can sometimes leave the deepest marks on our hearts and in history. The world's shortest war, 38 minutes long. Have you ever had a disagreement? Maybe with a friend or a sibling, that flared up in a flash and was over before you could even really process it. A quick shout, a sudden silence, and then it's just done. Imagine that, but on the scale of nations, with real battleships and real lives at stake. Here's a story that feels almost unbelievable. But it really happened. The shortest war in history, lasting only 38 minutes. This was the Anglo-Zanzibar War. Back in 1896, Zanzibar is an island off the coast of East Africa. A new sultan took power there, and the British government, which had a lot of influence in the region, didn't approve. They told him to step down. He refused, and so, just like that, the British Navy's ships opened fire on the Sultan's palace. The defending forces were completely outmatched. In less than an hour, the battle was over. Zanzibar surrendered. It makes you stop and think, doesn't it? That such a terrible, violent event could be over so quickly. But here's the thing. Even though it was brief, it still meant lives lost, buildings destroyed, and a huge change in power for Zanzibar. It shows us how quickly conflict can erupt when there's a massive imbalance of power and a failure to talk things through. It's like a small argument turning into a huge, explosive fight in a few seconds, all because one person refused to listen and the other had all the power. And when it's over, everyone is left a little shaken, wondering if it was really worth it. So, this super short war isn't just a strange historical fact, it's a quiet reminder of how fragile peace can be. It tells us that even the quickest conflicts leave their mark, and that the moments leading up to a fight are often more important than the fight itself. It makes us wish for a world where even 38 minutes of fighting could be avoided completely, with words chosen instead of weapons. The man who stole himself the man who stole himself ***. Have you ever truly thought about owning yourself? Not your belongings, but you ***. Your thoughts, your dreams, your very being. It sounds strange, right? Because, of course, you own yourself. But imagine a time when that wasn't true for everyone. History holds stories so powerful, they feel impossible. Here's one that might make your heart ache and swell. The story of someone who had to steal himself. This wasn't shoplifting. It was a human being, property by law, daring to reclaim their own life and freedom. In times of slavery, people were treated as objects. They were bought and sold, their lives controlled. They weren't seen as individuals, but as things. So, when someone escaped, ran for freedom, it was called stealing themselves. That phrase shows how wrong the system was. It wasn't stealing, it was simply reclaiming. It's like if someone tried to tell you your own unique ideas weren't yours, or that the feelings in your heart belonged to them. It feels wrong, doesn't it? Because those things are intrinsically you ***. And that's exactly what these brave people did. They risked everything to say, no, I belong to me. They crossed miles, hid, all to grab the freedom that was their birthright. Their journey was full of fear, but also incredible, burning hope. It teaches us something profound about being human, that the spirit of freedom can't truly be owned or broken. It shows us immense courage to fight for your own truth. It reminds us that true ownership isn't about what you possess, but about the right to simply be who you are, without chains. A pigeon that won a medal for bravery. Have you ever stopped to think about what true bravery looks like? We often picture strong soldiers or firefighters, people who face danger, but sometimes courage comes from the most unexpected heroes. Here's what I found about a creature so small, yet so vital. It changed lives during one of humanity's darkest times. Imagine the chaotic horror of World War I. Soldiers were trapped in trenches, cut off. Communication was almost impossible. Radios were unreliable, and runners often didn't make it. In this desperate situation, one of the most reliable forms of communication was, believe it or not, a pigeon. These homing pigeons were trained to fly back to their loft, carrying tiny but life-saving messages. One such hero was a pigeon named Cher Ami. In October 1918, an American battalion, the Lost Battalion, was surrounded by enemy forces. They were running out of supplies. Worse, Their own artillery was mistakenly shelling them. They sent out pigeons, but they were shot down. Hope was fading fast. Finally, they released Sher Ami, carrying a message tucked into a tiny canister on her leg. The message was simple. We are along the road parallel to 276.4. Our own artillery is dropping a barrage directly on us. For heaven's sake, stop it. As she flew, enemy bullets rained down. She was hit, pierced in the breast, and one leg was shot through. But here's the thing. Sher Ami kept flying. She didn't give up. For 25 agonizing miles, bleeding and wounded, she pushed through the sky. 1 hour later, she arrived at her loft, exhausted, but with the message still attached. Because of her incredible bravery, the artillery fire stopped, and 194 American soldiers were saved. She became a legend, a symbol of hope. It reminds me of a time when you might be working on a big school project. Everyone's stressed, and you feel like giving up. But then, one small, crucial piece of information, maybe a text or a quiet suggestion, changes everything. It doesn't seem like much, but it turns the tide, pushing the team to success. Sher Ami was that crucial message, that unwavering spark of hope. So, when we think about courage, maybe we don't always need to look for grand gestures. Sometimes, the most profound bravery comes from the smallest beings. It's about a silent, unwavering will to complete a mission, even when wounded. It teaches us that strength isn't just about physical power, but about the spirit that refuses to surrender, a spirit that can echo through history and touch our hearts. The king who lost his kingdom in a chess game. Have you ever played a game where the pressure was real, where every move felt huge? Imagine that feeling, but instead of just losing a match, you lose something far, far greater. Stories tell of a king whose pride, or perhaps his love for a challenge, led him to place an unimaginable wager on a chessboard. Picture it, a grand hall, silent except for the soft click of wooden pieces. Two kings, two minds battling, their eyes fixed on the board. This wasn't just a game for sport. Legend says this king, sure of his skill, agreed to stake a rich province, a vital part of his actual kingdom, against his opponent. The air must have been thick with tension. Then, the moment arrived, a final, crushing checkmate. The victorious king took more than just the game. The defeated one watched as years of history, lands, and people were signed away, all because of a game played on a board. How strange is that? How could something so grand be decided by something so small? It's a bit like when you make a quick decision without thinking, maybe sending a text too fast, or not studying for a pop quiz. A small choice, but it can impact your whole day, or even a grade. For this king, his loss meant losing actual territory and real people under his rule. It shows how our choices, even those made in play, can carry immense weight. Here's the thing. Sometimes, the biggest changes don't come from huge wars. They can creep in quietly, hidden in a simple game, a single promise, or a moment of overconfidence. This story reminds us that even when we feel powerful, our decisions ripple outwards, touching countless lives in ways we never intended. It makes you wonder about the unseen power in every small choice. The real-life Robin Hood of the Old West. Have you ever wondered if the stories we tell, like Robin Hood, ever really come true? Not with magic arrows, but with real people facing tough times. Here's the thing. Sometimes, in history, the line between hero and outlaw gets really blurry, especially when people are struggling. The Old West had its own version, a figure often called a real-life Robin Hood. This wasn't someone who dressed in green tights, but a person who lived outside the law. So here's what happened. In a world where powerful banks and railroads often took advantage of ordinary folks, many felt helpless. They saw their land taken, their savings disappear. When a bandit would raid a train or a bank, and then stories spread that they shared their loot with the poor, or gave money to struggling families, suddenly they weren't just a criminal. Too many, they became a symbol of defiance, a rough kind of justice. It was like fighting back against a system that felt unfair, even if their methods were wrong. Think about it like this. Imagine a school rule that makes it super hard for some kids to get important class supplies, but easy for others. Then, someone finds a way to get those supplies and shares them, even if they had to break a small rule. Would you see them as purely bad? Or would you feel a mix of feelings, understanding why they did it, even if it wasn't perfectly right? This helps us understand the complex feelings people had. The stories of these Old West figures remind us that good and bad aren't always simple, clear choices. Sometimes, people do things that are technically wrong, but for reasons that resonate deeply with others who feel forgotten or mistreated. History often asks us to look beyond the surface, to understand the pain and the hope that drive human actions, even the ones we might not agree with. The country that forgot it was at war. Have you ever felt so safe, so completely at peace, that you almost forgot what it was like to be scared, or what it felt like to carry a heavy worry around every single day? It's a strange thought, but imagine a whole country living that way. A place that, in a sense, chose to forget the constant readiness for war. Here's the thing, this isn't a fairy tale. It's the true story of Costa Rica. After a painful civil war in 1948, which caused a lot of heartbreak and fighting, their leaders made a brave, almost unbelievable choice. They decided to get rid of their national army, not just reduce it, but abolish it completely. Gone. This wasn't a temporary measure, it was written into their constitution. So here's what happened. For over 70 years now, generations of Costa Ricans have grown up in a country without the rumble of tanks or the constant training of soldiers. Instead of spending money on weapons in military bases, they poured those resources into public education, healthcare for everyone, and protecting their incredible rainforests. It's like when you finish a really difficult, stressful school project, you finally turn it in, and the stress just melts away. You don't keep practicing for that project. You move on to learning new, exciting things. For them, peace became the everyday norm. The deep, often unspoken fear of conflict that touches so many other nations just isn't part of their daily thinking. They've lived without a military for so long, they've almost forgotten what it means to always be prepared for battle. Think about how your body heals from a cut or a bruise. Over time, the memory of the pain fades, and your skin feels normal again. You almost forget it was ever hurt. This unique history shows us something profound. It's a quiet truth that peace isn't just the absence of fighting. It's an active choice, a presence of focus on things like learning, health, and nature. It reminds us that history isn't just about battles and struggles, but also about the incredible, sometimes unbelievable, choices humans make to build a more gentle, hopeful future. The doctor who prescribed chocolate for everything. Imagine feeling sick, maybe a little down, and the doctor tells you to eat chocolate. Not just a little piece, but as the actual medicine. Sounds pretty wild, right? Well, for a long time, centuries ago, people really did think chocolate held powerful secrets, not just as a sweet treat, but as a cure. In ancient cultures, like the Mayans and Aztecs, cacao was seen as a sacred gift from the gods. They used it in rituals, and yes, even as medicine. It wasn't just about taste, it was about its energy, its warmth, its perceived magic. And then there were European doctors, even into the 17th and 18th centuries, who actually wrote down recipes for chocolate-based remedies. They thought it could help with everything from stomach aches to feeling heartbroken. Imagine a doctor prescribing a rich, warm cup of chocolate for a fever. It wasn't always just a myth. Some really believed in its healing power, maybe because it made people feel better, comforted them. Think about it like this: when you're feeling a bit overwhelmed, or just sad, sometimes a warm hug helps, or a favorite song, or even a cozy blanket. These things don't cure a broken arm, but they bring comfort. They make your mind feel safer, calmer. Chocolate, for many people back then, and even now, has that same kind of power. It releases certain chemicals in your brain that make you feel good, like a tiny burst of happiness. So, while it couldn't fix a truly serious illness, it surely brought a moment of peace, a sense of care. This story makes you wonder, doesn't it? What is medicine, really? Is it just chemicals and science, or is there something more? Sometimes, the feeling of being cared for, the simple comfort, can be just as powerful as any pill. Maybe that doctor, prescribing chocolate for everything, understood something deep about the human heart, that sometimes, what we need most is a little bit of warmth, a little bit of joy, and a whole lot of comfort. The great train robbery that wasn't Dive. You ever heard a story so many times, it feels like it must be true, like it's etched into history. Sometimes, what we believe happened isn't quite the truth, or even close. Our minds love a good story, sometimes reshaping reality. Think about a famous event, often talked about: a daring train robbery, maybe in the Old West. Masked figures leaping onto a moving train, guns blazing, making off with a fortune. It sounds thrilling, dramatic, fitting our idea of how things were. But here's the thing. Some of history's most famous stories are built on shaky ground. A few whispered words, a reporter exaggerating, a storyteller making things more exciting, and suddenly, a small misunderstanding becomes a legendary event. It's like playing a game of telephone in class. One person whispers a simple phrase. By the time it reaches the last person, it's a completely different sentence, maybe even silly. The first message is lost, replaced by something much wilder. And that's how some facts about the past get twisted. We want to believe in heroes and villains, in grand adventures, so much that we sometimes create them. Even if old records tell a quieter, more ordinary tale, a thrilling story's feeling can be so strong, it hides what happened. So, when you hear a tale that sounds too perfect, too exciting to be true, maybe pause. Maybe ask if the quiet space between the loud details holds a different, softer truth. Sometimes, the most important stories aren't about what burst into being, but what quietly faded, or what never truly began. It makes you wonder what other great events are just echoes of our desire for drama. And that's why it matters to look closely, to feel for the calm truth beneath the noise. The ship that sank, and the books that stayed dry. The ship that sank and the books that stayed dry. Have you ever wondered what truly lasts when everything else is gone? It's a big question, and history sometimes gives us surprising answers. Think of the asterisk, Titanic asterisk. We all know the story. A huge ship, called Unsinkable, sank on its first trip. A tale of terrible loss. But here's a curious detail. Father Francis Brown, a young priest, sailed part of that journey. He took photos on board, grand rooms, smiling people. He got off at an earlier port because his superior cancelled his ticket. This twist of fate saved his life. And those photos, they survived, safe and dry, far from the icy Atlantic. It feels strange, doesn't it? A ship, a symbol of human power, sank, but fragile paper photos lived on. This makes you think about what truly lasts. We trust big, strong things to last forever. Yet, sometimes, it's the quiet, small things, a diary, a letter, a picture, that carry our stories forward. They survive disasters that sink giants. Think about your own life. Maybe you worked hard on a school project, and it got ruined. But then, a quick drawing you did on a scrap of paper gets taped to your fridge. It stays there for years, a lasting memory. It wasn't the main event, but it became something enduring. This story of the asterisk, Titanic asterisk, and those photos shares a quiet truth. Even when great things fall apart, some beauty endures. Legacies aren't always the biggest. They are found in unexpected places. These small, treasured things defy the odds, speaking to us after the noise and sadness fade. It's a gentle whisper. Not everything is lost, even when it feels like it is. The queen who invented the fork. Have you ever paused, just for a moment, to look at the fork in your hand? It's just there, right? A simple tool, something we use every day without a second thought. But imagine a time when this everyday object was so new, so strange, that it caused a scandal. This is the story of a Byzantine princess who traveled from the ancient city of Constantinople to a vastly different world in Germany. Around the year 972, she was destined to marry an emperor, and she brought with her the customs of a sophisticated culture. One of these customs involved a small, two-pronged golden implement, something almost unheard of in Western Europe, a fork. Imagine the whispers, the wide eyes, the sheer shock. Most people then ate with their fingers, or maybe a knife and a spoon. So, when Theophanu began to delicately lift food to her mouth using this tiny, shiny, new tool, it felt profoundly foreign. People thought it was extravagant, even arrogant. Some found it almost sacrilegious, a rejection of the simpler ways. It wasn't just a different way to eat. It was a cultural statement, a challenge to what was normal. Think about a time when you've tried something new, maybe a new fashion trend, or a way of doing things that your friends hadn't caught on to yet. You might feel a little awkward, a little on display. Theophanu must have felt that, but on a grander scale, facing an entire court. Yet, she persisted, showing a quiet strength in her own traditions. Her fork was more than just a piece of metal. It was a tiny rebellion against the status quo. It reminds us that big changes often begin with small, individual acts of courage. Sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is simply be yourself, even if it looks strange to others. And over hundreds of years, that strange new fork became the essential unthought-of object we all use today. It makes you wonder what other everyday things hold such surprising, emotional stories from the past. The day the sun didn't shine for a whole year. Can you imagine a year where the sun felt like a distant memory, where every day was dim, as if trapped in a never-ending twilight? This isn't a story from a fantasy book. This actually happened. Back in the year 536 AD, the world experienced something truly strange and terrifying. A massive volcanic eruption, likely in Iceland, threw so much ash and dust into the sky that it blocked out the sun. For almost 18 months, a thick, dusty veil covered much of the northern hemisphere. Here's what happened. The air grew cold, even in summer. Crops failed because they didn't get enough sunlight to grow. This led to widespread hunger and sickness. People didn't know why it was happening. They just knew the world felt wrong, darker, and colder. Imagine the fear, the confusion, the feeling that nature itself had turned against them. People wrote about a dry fog that never lifted, making the sun appear like a weak, pale moon. Life became a struggle just to find enough food and stay warm. Think about how you feel on a really gloomy, rainy day, when the sky is just one big gray blanket. You might feel a bit tired, maybe a little sad, and you just want the sun to come out. Now, picture that feeling, but stretched out for over a year. Your favorite outdoor activities would be impossible. Colors would look muted. The simple joy of a sunny morning would vanish. That's what people lived through. The loss wasn't just physical, it was deeply emotional, changing the mood and hope of an entire generation. But here's the thing about stories like this. They remind us how much we depend on the simple, everyday things we often take for granted. The sun's light is more than just warmth. It's a symbol of hope, of growth, of life itself. And sometimes, when the light feels furthest away, that's when we truly understand its power and how much we need it to shine again. A spy who hid messages in art. Have you ever kept a secret so important you felt it humming inside you? What if that secret wasn't just in your head, but woven into something beautiful, something everyone could see, but only you could truly understand? Imagine living when sending a simple message meant life or death. Spies couldn't just text. They became incredibly clever, hiding vital information in plain sight. Inside art. It wasn't always famous paintings. It could be a drawing, a sketch, or a pattern on fabric. The secret was a whisper, a tiny detail, a specific brushstroke, a subtle arrangement of colors. Only the person with the key would notice. It was about survival. It shows our deep need to connect, even when danger pushes us apart. Think about a secret handshake with a friend. To others, it's just a high five. But to you, each grip or tap tells a story, confirms a plan. The spy's art was like that. The hidden message wasn't the art itself, but how it was made. An invisible code embedded in its beauty. Only the person who knew the handshake of the artwork would read its true, urgent meaning. It's a powerful idea, isn't it? That beauty could hold such serious weight, carrying the fate of nations in a simple picture. It reminds us to look closer, to wonder about hidden stories everywhere. It shows the quiet strength of people who spoke in whispers, making art a shield, a weapon, a lifeline. It's a testament to human cleverness and the silent bravery that shaped history. The town where everyone lived in one building. Have you ever imagined living in a place where your entire world was under one roof? Not just your home, but your school, the grocery store, even the police station. There's a town in Alaska called Whittier, and for its residents, this isn't imagination. It's their daily life. Whittier is a small, isolated place. It's tucked between mountains and a cold bay. The weather is often brutal, with heavy snow and strong winds making going outside hard for much of the year. So, here's the thing. Almost everyone in town lives in a single large building. It's called Baggage Towers. Think of it like a giant neighborhood, but one stacked up, reaching for the sky. Kids walk down the hall to school. Adults take an elevator to the post office or the small store. City offices, police, and even a hotel are all inside. It might sound strange, right? But it makes sense when you consider the harsh environment. This isn't just a different way to live. It's how they've learned to survive in such an extreme place. Living like this creates a unique kind of community. Imagine spending a whole school year with the same few kids. Then you see them at the store, at the playground, at every town event. That's because everyone is always just a few steps away. You know everyone, and everyone knows you. It's a closeness that's hard to escape. This kind of life asks big questions about how we live together. We usually like our own space, our privacy, the quiet chance to be alone. But in Whittier, privacy works differently. You learn to live with constant closeness. You learn to be friends, classmates, and neighbors all at once, always. It shows us how people adapt, building community even in unusual settings. This reminds us that connection can be found in surprising ways, but it also makes us think about our human need for both togetherness and our own quiet corner. The man who fell from the sky and lived. Have you ever stopped to wonder about moments so unlikely they feel like they belong in a made-up story? Sometimes, life gives us these moments. Think about this. A person, somehow, falling from an incredible height, thousands of feet up in the sky, from an airplane or a damaged craft. Every bit of common sense, every law of science, tells us this is impossible to survive. The impact, the cold, the sheer force. Yet, history holds whispers, and sometimes shouts, of those who did. Here's the thing. It's not just a myth. There are real accounts of people, some soldiers, some civilians, who experienced just such a fall. They plummeted towards Earth, often without a parachute, facing what should have been an absolute end. But then, they landed, on snow, in thick trees, in unexpected soft spots. They were broken, bruised, forever changed, but alive. This kind of story makes you feel something deep inside. It makes you think about fate, about pure luck, and about the incredible strength of the human body and spirit. When you drop a delicate glass and it shatters, you expect it. But imagine dropping it, and it bounces, perfectly fine. It's like that, but with a human life. It's a moment that says, even when all hope seems gone, when the odds are stacked against you like an impossibly tall tower, there can still be a chance. These survivors often speak of a profound shift, a new understanding of how precious each breath is. This isn't about being careless or taking huge risks. It's about understanding that life holds incredible, sometimes terrifying, mysteries, and that the human will to keep going, to cling to life, is far more powerful than we often realize. It reminds us that even after the hardest falls, literally or figuratively, there's always a possibility of getting up again. So, maybe it's not just about a fall from the sky, it's about the quiet strength inside us, ready for those moments when we need it most. And that's why it matters. The invention of the potato chip by accident. Have you ever stopped to think about how some of the very best things in life just appear when we're not even looking for them? Or even, in a strange twist, when something goes entirely wrong? It's a truly curious idea, isn't it? That a simple mistake, a moment of irritation, or a totally unplanned event could actually spark something amazing, something that touches millions of lives. Here's a perfect example of this quiet magic. The crispy, salty potato chip. Most everyone loves them, but how did they even come to be? It wasn't a grand plan. Back in 1853, a chef named George Crumb worked at a restaurant in Saratoga Springs, New York. One day, a famously picky customer kept sending back his fried potatoes. He complained they were too thick, too soft. George Crumb, feeling quite annoyed, decided to play a little trick. He sliced the potatoes as thin as paper, almost see-through. Then he fried them until they were incredibly crisp and golden, practically shattering. To finish, he added a generous sprinkle of salt. He thought, let's see him complain about these asterisks. But here's what actually happened. The customer absolutely loved them, finding them delicious and unique, asking for more. And just like that, out of frustration, the potato chip was born. It's a lot like when you're trying to build something specific with LED, but you accidentally drop a piece, and it lands in a way that gives you a cooler, more creative idea. This story makes you pause and think, doesn't it? It shows us that life doesn't always follow a perfect, straight line. Sometimes, when things don't quite go as we expect, or when a small blunder happens, it quietly opens a door to something new and, often, far better than we imagined. It teaches us to be open to the unexpected, to find beauty in those little oops moments. Maybe those unplanned turns are where the true magic of discovery waits. The race to the moon and the hidden math. Have you ever thought about what really sent us to the moon? We picture rockets, brave astronauts, and heroic missions. But what if the most crucial power, the one holding it all together, was something almost invisible? It was math, working quietly behind every step. Not just simple numbers, but understanding how things move in space, how gravity pulls, how a tiny mistake could mean disaster. Math acted like a crystal ball, predicting a future journey no one had ever taken. This hidden math wasn't flashy, but it was the silent engine for that impossible dream. Back in the 1960s, two powerful nations raced. Both the US and the Soviet Union wanted to be first to the moon. This wasn't just a game, it was about proving who was smarter. People poured their souls into this goal. Before any rocket could lift off, hundreds of brilliant minds, many of them women called human computers, did endless calculations by hand. Their pencils danced, charting paths through the unknown, mapping a future that felt impossible. Think about baking a complicated cake. You need every ingredient right, mixed in specific order, at the perfect temperature. If one step is wrong, the cake won't rise or taste awful. Getting to the moon was like baking the most important, dangerous cake ever. Every tiny measurement, angle, and bit of timing had to be perfect. The math was the vital recipe, with no room for error. So, when we look up at the moon, let's also remember the unseen forces that guided us there. The quiet, deep work of minds wrestling with numbers, turning abstract ideas into actual journeys. It reminds us that often, incredible things aren't just thanks to loud heroes, but also to hidden structures, careful thought, and steady, quiet dedication. It's a kind of invisible magic. The time New York City ran out of coffee can, you imagine waking up and finding one of your daily comforts just isn't there? Not just for you, but for a whole city. That's what happened in New York City in 1932. New York is a city that never truly sleeps, and it runs on a lot of things. For many people, coffee is one of them. A warm cup, a midday boost, a quiet moment. It feels like such a small, constant part of life. But in 1932, a massive dockworkers' strike happened. Ships couldn't unload their cargo, and that cargo included lots of coffee beans. So, the city that felt like it had everything, suddenly had almost no coffee. Think about it. Not just a temporary inconvenience, but a genuine scarcity. People who relied on that morning brew woke up to an empty pot, or maybe a tiny, expensive cup they waited hours for. Panic set in. News reports shared the panic. People lined up for blocks outside stores, hoping to snag a few precious beans. This wasn't a world war or a natural disaster. It was just a strike, affecting one simple import. But it showed how deeply a simple drink was woven into the fabric of daily life, into people's routines and their normal lives. Imagine your phone suddenly not working, or the internet just disappearing for weeks. That feeling of something essential being gone, of your rhythm being broken, that's how it felt for many New Yorkers. It makes you think about the invisible threads that hold our daily lives together. How often do we just expect things to be there? We take for granted the ships, the workers, the stores that stock shelves. Sometimes, it takes something truly unexpected, like a city running out of coffee, to make us pause. It reminds us to be grateful for the simple comforts, and to remember that even the smallest parts of our world are connected in big, surprising ways. And that's why it matters. A ghost army that fooled Hitler. Have you ever wondered how easy it is to believe something, even when it's not real? What if an entire army wasn't real at all, but still managed to change the course of a massive war? During World War II, a secret group of American soldiers did just that. They weren't ordinary fighters. They were artists, designers, sound engineers, and actors, forming a unit later known as the Ghost Army. Their mission was simple but incredible: to trick Hitler and his generals into thinking the main Allied invasion of Europe was happening in a completely different place than the actual DIT landings. Here's how they did it. They crafted an elaborate illusion. They used inflatable tanks and cannons that looked absolutely real from the sky or from a distance, blowing them up with air to stand tall in fields. They created fake radio messages, sending coded chatter to make it sound like huge divisions were on the move, communicating across vast distances. And they even played recordings of marching troops, rumbling vehicles, and construction sounds through powerful speakers to create the auditory illusion of a massive army setting up camp. Imagine seeing what looked like an entire military base, complete with vehicles and tents, but knowing it was all just rubber, paint, and sound effects. Don't think about when you see a movie set, like a backdrop of a city that looks so real on screen, but you know it's just painted wood and canvas, or when you use a filter on your phone to make something appear different from what it truly is. The Ghost Army did something similar, but with lives at stake. They built a pretend world, a phantom battlefield, solely within the minds of their enemies. It makes you stop and consider the sheer power of human imagination, and the subtle art of deception. The Ghost Army never fired a shot in anger, but their creativity and courage undoubtedly saved countless lives by pulling enemy forces away from the real invasion points. It shows us that sometimes the greatest battles aren't fought with bullets and bombs, but with clever ideas and the quiet, often hidden, ways people can shift history by simply making others believe in something that isn't actually there. It reminds us that appearances can be incredibly misleading, and what we choose to believe often shapes our world. The man who ate a bicycle. Have you ever heard a story so wild, you just can't believe it's true? Like someone eating a bicycle, it sounds impossible, right? Like something from a made-up tall tale. But it actually happened. A man named Michel Lotito from France became famous for eating things that were not food. Metal, glass, rubber, all sorts of strange stuff. He didn't just bite into a bike. Instead, he would break objects into tiny pieces. He'd eat them slowly, usually with water and mineral oil to help them go down. He did this for years, even eating an entire Cessna 150 airplane over 2 years. It wasn't about hunger. It was about proving something, pushing the limits of what a human body could do. His body was unique, with a stomach lining twice as thick as normal, protecting him from sharp edges. This might sound like a strange trick, but think about it. Our bodies are amazing machines, capable of incredible things. Most of us eat food, and our stomachs break it down. His stomach was just built differently, allowing this extreme feat. It's like how some people train to run ultramarathons or hold their breath for minutes underwater. They push past what most of us think is possible. Lotito simply found a very unusual way to push limits, an extreme example of adaptation. So, what does this story tell us? Maybe it shows how mysterious the human body truly is. It reminds us that sometimes reality can be far stranger than any story we could invent, and it makes us quietly wonder about the hidden strengths and unique capabilities inside each of us. It's a gentle whisper about endless possibilities, and sometimes the unbelievable quirks of life itself. The president who got stuck in a bathtub. Can you imagine feeling so large, so vast, that the world designed for others simply couldn't contain you? There are moments in history, gentle and strange, that seem to whisper truths we often miss. Take the story of President William Howard Taft and his famous bathtub. He was a big man, a president, carrying the weight of a nation. But even someone so powerful, so important, could find themselves in a situation both private and profoundly humbling. The story goes he once got stuck in the White House tub, a moment of physical constraint for a man of immense responsibility. This tale, whether completely true or just a legend, touches on something very real inside us all. It's the feeling of life getting a little too big, or maybe we feel a little too big for life. We can feel trapped, not by a porcelain tub, but by expectations, by a difficult day, or by simply feeling out of place. Think about it like a favorite shirt you've loved for years, but one morning, it just doesn't fit anymore. It's a small, everyday moment, but it can make you pause, make you feel a little sad, or maybe even a bit silly. Here's the thing. We all face moments where the world doesn't quite fit our size, our feelings, or our plans. Even presidents, with all their power, are just people. They experience moments of awkwardness, of feeling a little too squeezed. This story reminds us of the quiet vulnerability hidden beneath even the grandest titles. It shows that sometimes the biggest challenges aren't wars or laws, but simply finding a way to fit, to breathe, and to accept the unexpected limits of our own human experience. And that's a thought that can make us feel a little more connected, a little less alone, in our own slightly too small moments. A city built on a buried forest. Have you ever wondered what's truly beneath your feet as you walk through a city? Not just dirt and rocks, but history. Sometimes, a whole other world is hidden, right below the sidewalks where people hurry by. Think about the city of Seattle, for instance. It's a busy, modern place, but much of its downtown is actually built on top of Asterisk itself. Asterisk. A long time ago, in 1889, a huge fire swept through Seattle. It destroyed almost everything. Instead of just rebuilding exactly where things were, the people of Seattle decided something amazing. They raised the street level. They built new buildings and new streets, several feet higher than the old ones. And that's why there's an entire underground city still there, tucked away below the new one. Old storefronts, old sidewalks, old dreams, all preserved in the dark. This isn't just a quirky fact. Here's the thing. It shows how life often layers itself, like how you grow, and the old you is still part of who you are, just deeper down. Cities do this too. They don't erase their past, they build on it. This makes you think about how every generation changes things, but the roots remain. It's like a whisper from another time, telling us about resilience and new beginnings. Imagine if your favorite tree in the park suddenly grew new roots on top of the old ones, raising the ground around it. The original roots are still there, supporting everything, but now there's a new layer, a new surface. That's kind of what Seattle did. It's a powerful feeling, knowing that beneath the busy noise of today, there are quiet echoes of yesterday. It teaches us that nothing truly disappears. The challenges people faced, their decisions, their hopes, they all become the foundation for what comes next. And that's why it matters. It reminds us that our own actions, big or small, are also building blocks, creating the world someone else will walk on, long after we're gone. It's a reminder that history isn't just in books, it's right here, under our very steps. The painter who faked masterpieces so well. Have you ever looked at something beautiful, something old, and felt a deep connection to its history, to the hands that made it long ago? What if that history was a clever lie? Here's the thing. In the world of art, there was a man named Han van Meegeren. He wasn't just a painter, he was a master of deception, someone who could trick the eyes of the most brilliant art experts. He painted new works by old masters, especially the famous Vermeer, who lived centuries ago. His forgeries were so convincing, so perfect, that museums and wealthy collectors bought them for massive sums, believing they were priceless historical treasures. They felt the same awe and reverence for these paintings as if they truly were lost works by a legendary artist. The illusion was complete. It wasn't just about money. It was about pride, about the very foundation of what people believed to be true. But here's what happened. After World War II, Van Meegeren was arrested. The charge: selling Dutch national treasures, including a Vermeer, to Nazi leaders. To prove he wasn't a traitor, he had to confess a truth that shook the art world to its core. He had painted them all himself. He demonstrated his skill right there in court. Imagine the feeling of those experts, realizing they had been utterly fooled, that their deeply held beliefs about certain artworks were just fiction. It's a bit like believing a story your grandparent told you about a magical place, only to find out years later they made it up just for fun. The story was still wonderful, and you loved hearing it, but knowing it wasn't real changes how you feel about it. So, does the beauty of the painting disappear once you know it's a fake? Maybe the true magic was in Van Meegeren's own incredible talent and in our willingness to believe. It makes us think, what really gives something its value? Is it the name attached to it, or the feeling it stirs inside us, regardless of who created it? The boy who found a mummy in his backyard. Have you ever wondered what secrets lie just beneath your feet? What if the ground you walk on every day held stories from hundreds, even thousands, of years ago? Well, for one young boy, this wasn't just a question. It became his reality, a quiet, almost unbelievable discovery that changed his world. Imagine this. You're playing outside, maybe digging a hole for fun, just like kids do, and then your shovel hits something hard, something different, not a rock, not a root, something that looks like a person, but not just any person, a body, preserved by the very earth, lying there for centuries, waiting to be found. This actually happened to a boy in Germany, back in the 1970s. He was playing in his yard and found the ancient remains of a person, later called the Winderby Girl or Winderby Boy by some, a body from the Iron Age, perfectly kept in a peat bog. Here's the thing about a find like that, it makes you realize how close the past truly is. It's not just in history books or faraway museums. Sometimes it's right under your swing set. It feels almost like time folds in on itself, and suddenly, someone who lived long before electricity, before cars, before even your grandparents' grandparents, is right there. Their life, their last moments, become part of your present. It's a bit like when you find an old, forgotten toy in a dusty box in your attic. Maybe it's a doll with faded hair, or a wooden train missing a wheel. You hold it, and you wonder about the child who loved it, what their days were like, what games they played. That small object connects you to a life that came before. Now, multiply that feeling 1,000 times, and imagine it's an actual person, a quiet witness from a world we can barely picture. This kind of discovery is a gentle reminder. It tells us that every piece of land, every patch of soil, has a memory. It carries echoes of lives lived, joys felt, and struggles faced. We are all part of a long, unbroken chain of humanity, and sometimes the earth lets us peek back, offering a silent hello from a very, very old friend. It makes you think, doesn't it, about all the untold stories hidden just below the surface, waiting for their moment in the sun. The Great Diamond Hoax of 1872. Have you ever wanted something so much that you almost tricked yourself into believing it was true, even if deep down, a tiny part of you wondered if it was real? Here's a story from a long time ago that shows how powerful that feeling can be. In 1872, the American West was a place of big dreams. People had heard about gold rushes, and everyone hoped to strike it rich. So, imagine the excitement when two men claimed they'd found a huge diamond in Ruby Field, just waiting to be picked up. The news spread fast. Rich bankers and famous investors, even big companies, were drawn in. They sent experts to see the site. These experts, perhaps a bit blinded by the huge promise of wealth, said it was real. They declared it the richest discovery of its kind. Because of this, millions of dollars were invested. New companies started, and many dreams soared. But here's the truth. It was all a giant lie. The two men had carefully salted the ground. They bought cheap, low-quality diamonds and rubies, sprinkled them across a remote area, and then led people there to discover them. It was a perfect trick. It played on everyone's desire for quick riches. It's like when a really exciting rumor goes around school. Everyone believes it because it sounds amazing, and it's what they want to be true, even without checking if it's actually real. The truth came out when a geologist noticed the diamonds were scattered in a way that just didn't make sense for how they naturally form. When the hoax was revealed, people felt foolish and angry. Their hopes were crushed. It wasn't just about losing money. It was about feeling tricked and losing trust. This story reminds us that sometimes the most exciting promises can hide the biggest deceptions. It teaches us to look past the sparkle and ask questions, because what truly glitters might just be a clever trick designed to catch your eye and your belief. When a balloon flight sparked a riot, have you ever seen something completely new? Something so strange it almost made your heart pound. Imagine the sky, a place people thought they knew, suddenly holding a huge, mysterious object. This is what happened in 18th century France. The year was 1783, and two clever brothers, the Montgolfiers, had just invented the hot air balloon. It was an amazing sight, a huge fabric bubble floating high above, carrying people. For some, it was a moment of pure wonder, a glimpse into a future they couldn't even dream of. But when one of these early balloons descended into a small French village, it didn't bring wonder, it brought terror. So here's what happened. This enormous unknown object, made of strange heavy cloth, slowly settled into a quiet field. The villagers had never seen anything like it. They didn't know it was a man-made craft, a beautiful invention. Their imaginations ran wild. They thought it was some kind of monster, a giant beast that had fallen from the sky, or perhaps even a demon. Fear took over everyone. They grabbed pitchforks and shovels, whatever they could find in their homes, and attacked it. They tore it apart with strength, shredding the fabric into scraps. They destroyed this marvel of science out of pure, deep, unreasoning fear of the unknown. Think about it this way. Imagine you're scrolling online and see a weird video, maybe a creature from a deep-sea documentary that looks alien. You might feel a chill, a moment of confusion. Now, picture that feeling multiplied 1,000 times, and imagine that strange thing is massive, real, and landing right outside your door. That's a bit like what they felt. People often fear what they don't understand, and that fear can quickly turn into something powerful and destructive, like a crowd turning angry. This story makes you wonder, doesn't it? How quickly can fear make us act without truly understanding? It reminds us that sometimes the strangest parts of history aren't about big wars or powerful leaders, but about the very human feelings that drive us. It shows how easy it is to misunderstand something new and beautiful, and how truly important it is to pause, to ask questions, and to try to understand before letting fear take hold. The doctor who operated on himself. Can you imagine a moment so desperate, so terrifying, you'd have to become your own surgeon? It sounds like a wild story, right? But this actually happened. In 1961, Dr. Leonid Rogozov was with a Soviet expedition in Antarctica, a place of freezing winds and empty silence. One day, Dr. Rogozov felt terrible stomach pain. As a doctor, he knew it was appendicitis. If it burst, he would die. Here's the problem. He was the only doctor at the remote station. No one else could operate. No one to call. Just him, alone, thousands of miles from any hospital. So here's what happened. Dr. Rogossov had to perform surgery on himself. Think about that. He had local anesthetic, but was wide awake. He used mirrors to see. 2 other expedition members, not medical experts, helped hold the mirror and pass instruments. But the cutting, the searching, the sewing, that was all him. It was a brutal act of survival, done with incredible focus in a tiny, cold, makeshift operating room. It's like being the only one who can fix a critical part on a spaceship, and that part is inside you. You have to fix yourself. The pain, the fear, the intense concentration to keep his hands steady while operating on his own body. It's almost impossible to truly grasp that. This story isn't just about medicine. It's about the incredible strength of the human spirit. It shows what happens when survival is a direct command you give yourself. It makes you wonder about courage's limits, and how deeply we value life when every breath is earned through an act of impossible will. The time an island disappeared, have you ever thought about something so solid, so real, that it just vanished, like it was never there? It sounds like a movie plot, but here's the thing, it has actually happened. Not in a magical way, but in a way that shows how powerful and unpredictable our Earth can be. Imagine a whole piece of land, an island, rising from the sea, people seeing it, claiming it, and then watching it slowly sink back beneath the waves, disappearing as if it were just a dream. One famous story is about an island named Ferdinand, which appeared off the coast of Sicily in 1831. Steam and smoke burst from the ocean, and then, a new island, almost like a small mountain, rose up. People were amazed. Different countries rushed to claim it, planting their flags. It was a scramble, a race to own this brand new land. But nature had other plans. The island was formed by a volcanic eruption, and it wasn't built to last. The same forces that brought it up slowly started to wear it down. Waves crashed against its soft rock, rain eroded its edges, and the volcanic activity settled. Over a few months, it began to shrink, getting smaller and smaller, until one day, it was gone. Just an underwater reef left behind. Think about a time you built a really cool sandcastle at the beach. You spent hours on it, adding details, making it perfect. You might have even felt proud of it, like it would last forever. But then the tide came in, slowly at first, then stronger, and little by little, your castle got washed away. The sand is still there, just not in the shape you made. That's a bit like it was real, it mattered for a little while, but the ocean always wins. It makes you think, doesn't it? If something as big as an island can just vanish, what does that say about other things we think are permanent? It reminds us that everything changes. The ground we stand on, the places we know, even our own lives. There's a quiet power in understanding that. It's a reminder to appreciate what's here now, because even the most solid things can be surprisingly temporary. The mystery of the Mary Celeste ghost ship can. You imagine a mystery so deep, so unsettling, that even today, over 150 years later, we still have no real answers. This is the story of the Mary Celeste. In 1872, a ship called the Dei Gratia was sailing the Atlantic when its crew spotted another vessel, drifting alone. It was the Mary Celeste. When they boarded it, they found no one. No captain, no crew, no trace of the captain's wife or their young daughter. Everyone was simply gone. But here's the thing. This wasn't like other shipwrecks. The Mary Celeste wasn't sinking. Its sails were partly set. The cargo of industrial alcohol, mostly untouched. The ship's logbook was even there, updated 10 days before the discovery. Personal items, like a sewing machine and a child's toy, remained in place. Food was laid out in the galley. There was no sign of struggle, no pirates, no clear reason for anyone to leave. It was as if everyone had simply vanished into thin air, leaving everything behind, and that's why it matters. For humans, a complete mystery can be more troubling than a clear danger. We want to understand, to solve puzzles. But some stories, like this one, refuse to fit. Think about it like this. Imagine you leave your jacket on your chair in an empty classroom during break. When you come back, the room is still empty, your jacket there, but your whole class, including your teacher, has vanished without a sound, and the door was locked. It's not just that they're gone, it's the impossible asterisk, that makes your mind spin. The Mary Celeste whispers about the world's enduring secrets, reminding us that some history will always stay out of reach. It speaks of the vast, unpredictable ocean, and the thin line between safety and disappearance. It makes us pause and wonder about those quiet moments before everything changes, leaving only questions that echo through time. And that feeling of deep wonder and a little unease stays with you. A city that had an underground river. Have you ever walked through a city, cars rushing by, tall buildings all around, and wondered what lies beneath it? Not just subways, but something ancient, something natural. Imagine a river, once sparkling in the sun, now flowing in darkness, hidden deep below the streets. That's the story of the Fleet River in London. Once, it was a busy waterway, bringing life and boats to the city. People lived along its banks, drawing water, trading, but as London grew, the river got more and more polluted. Slowly, piece by piece, the city decided to cover it up, burying it under roads and buildings. Today, you can't see it. It still flows, a hidden current, a ghost river, pushing its way through tunnels and pipes, carrying the city's waste out to the larger Thames. It's still there, a pulsing vein beneath the concrete, a secret current shaping the ground London stands on, even if no one sees it. This act of burying a river tells us something about how we humans interact with the world. We seek control. We build over inconveniences. For those who covered the fleet, it was a problem solved, a space reclaimed. But by doing so, they also buried a piece of the city's soul, a link to its wilder past. Think about it. Every city, every life, has hidden layers. Just like you might have feelings or worries no one else sees, but they still shape how you act or think. They're a quiet undercurrent, influencing everything, even when not obvious. And here's the thing about our world, and even ourselves. So much that truly matters isn't visible on the surface. The strength of a building comes from its unseen foundations. A tree's power lies in its roots, buried deep in the earth. The Fleet River reminds us that sometimes, the most profound parts of a story, the deepest truths, are the ones hidden away, quietly doing their work, waiting for us to remember they exist. It teaches us to look deeper, to feel for the pulse beneath the pavement. It teaches us that even when something is out of sight, its journey continues, shaping everything around it. The woman who walked around the world. Have you ever looked at a map, a globe even, and really thought about how huge our planet is? Imagine tracing your finger across continents, over vast oceans, and then try to picture actually walking every single one of those miles. It sounds like a made-up story, like something from a legend, right? But here's the thing. A woman named Fiona Campbell actually did it. She walked around the world. This wasn't just a long hike. This was a journey that took her years, crossing deserts, enduring freezing winters, facing danger and loneliness. Think about it for a moment. Every step, every single footfall, was chosen. Each one took her further from where she began, through endless landscapes, with only her own 2 feet to carry her. It makes you wonder what kind of strength lives inside a person to keep going like that. For centuries, people have dared to journey to the edges of what they knew. Ancient sailors pushed their limits to find new lands. Explorers climbed mountains no one had ever seen. But walking the entire circumference of the earth, that's a different kind of challenge. It's not about discovering a new place, but about discovering something within yourself. It's a lot like when you have a massive project for school, maybe writing a long essay or practicing for a big performance. At first, it feels impossible, too big to even start. But then you break it down, one paragraph at a time, one practice session at a time, and slowly, step by step, you get there. Fiona's walk was that, but on the grandest scale imaginable. Her story isn't just about miles covered. It's about the quiet courage to face down the overwhelming, day after day. It reminds us that maybe our own limits aren't quite where we think they are. That, with enough determination, and one foot in front of the other, even the most impossible dream can begin to take shape. And that's why it matters. The man who claimed to be a time traveler. Have you ever looked at an old photograph, a faded picture from a long-gone year, and truly wished you could step inside that moment? To hear the old sounds, feel the air, and know what those people were thinking. History holds so many strange tales, but few capture our hearts like the idea of someone actually slipping through time. It stirs a mix of wonder and a quiet longing in us all. Imagine a person, maybe a little lost or out of place, who suddenly appears and shares stories not from another country, but from another era. We find these kinds of legends scattered through history. There are whispers about Rudolph Fuentes, said to vanish from 1876 New York and reappear, confused and still dressed in old clothes. In 1950, or the more recent stories of John Titor, who claimed he came from 2036, bringing warnings from the future. Here's the thing, whether these stories are true or just myths, they speak to something very human inside us. We all feel time moving, always forward. We often wish we could fix past mistakes or get a quick peek at what's coming next. Think about looking at your own baby pictures. That's you, but a different you. In a moment you can only visit through memory. Or how you might write a letter to your future self, sealing it away for years. These are our own small ways of trying to touch time, to bridge the gap. These tales of time travelers make us pause. They gently ask us to wonder about what we truly know about reality. They show us that the line between what is real and what we deeply wish to believe can sometimes blur. Maybe these stories are simply legends, echoes of our deepest hopes and fears about what lies beyond our current moment. But they also show us how powerful human wonder is, how much we long to understand the great mystery of time and our own journey through it. They make us quietly wonder if, just perhaps, time isn't as solid as we think, and that peaceful, thoughtful feeling can stay with you long after the story ends. The town that was flooded on purpose. You imagine having to leave your home, your whole town, knowing that soon it would disappear forever under a huge lake, not because of a storm, but because people decided it had to happen. This isn't a made-up story. It's a real part of our past. There are towns, entire communities, that were purposely flooded. They did this to create massive reservoirs, which are like giant man-made lakes. These lakes were needed to bring clean drinking water or electricity to big cities that were growing fast. So here's what happened. To serve millions of people in a distant city, a few hundred or a few thousand had to give up everything. Think about saying goodbye to your house, the local store, the quiet street where you learned to ride your bike, even the cemetery where your grandparents rested. Imagine watching the water slowly rise, knowing it would swallow up all those memories. It wasn't a natural flood, it was a chosen one, a sacrifice made for what was called the greater good. This kind of choice is hard to understand. It's a bit like when you have to make a tough decision for your family, like moving to a new city for a better job or school. You might miss your old friends and your favorite spots, but you know it's for a bigger purpose, something important for everyone in the long run. There's a sadness there, even if it's the right thing to do. Underneath the calm surface of these reservoirs, forgotten towns still exist. Roads lead nowhere. Old foundations mark where houses once stood. Even though the buildings are gone, the echoes of the lives lived there still whisper in the quiet water. It reminds us how much we give up sometimes for what we call progress. It teaches us that every big step forward has a story of loss and memory woven into it. The water that brings life to millions also holds the silent stories of those who gave up their world, becoming a hidden piece of history. The real story behind the Trojan horse. Have you ever wondered about the Trojan horse? The epic tale where Greek soldiers hid inside a giant wooden horse, tricking the city of Troy into bringing their own doom inside their walls. It's a powerful symbol of clever deception. But here's the thing. Sometimes, history isn't quite as simple or fantastical as the legends make it sound. Many historians believe the Trojan horse might not have been a horse at all. Instead, it could have been something more practical, but just as cunning. Maybe it was a massive siege weapon, designed to break down the city gates, and its shape was called a horse by the people back then. Or perhaps, and this is another interesting idea, it was a bribe. A huge gift of money or resources that convinced a Trojan guard or official to secretly open the city gates from the inside. Imagine the trust that was broken, the betrayal. Think about it like this. Have you ever gotten a pop-up ad online that looks totally legitimate, promising something amazing? You click on it, and suddenly your computer is slowed down, or you're seeing ads everywhere. That seemingly helpful pop-up was actually a hidden trick. It looked like a gift, but it carried a hidden danger. The Trojan horse is a bit like that, something that appears harmless or even beneficial, but holds a secret threat. This ancient story, whether literal or symbolic, still teaches us a lot. It reminds us that appearances can be deceiving. The biggest dangers don't always come with flashing lights or loud warnings. Sometimes they arrive quietly, dressed up as something good, something we welcome into our lives. It makes you think about wisdom and how important it is to look beyond the surface, to question what seems too good. It's a quiet lesson about protecting what matters, not just with strength, but with careful thought. A boy who foiled a robbery with his homework Have you ever thought how the smallest things can change everything, like a tiny pebble starting a landslide, or a whisper turning into a powerful idea? History shows how ordinary things become heroes unexpectedly. Imagine a quiet night, deep into the hours when most people are fast asleep. A young boy, maybe not much older than you, was still up, hunched over his desk. His mission, finishing a tough math assignment. Numbers swirled on the page, the only sound the soft scratch of his pencil. But then, a different sound, a creak, a muffled thud. Robbers. They were breaking into his home. Fear gripped him, a cold, heavy feeling. He dove under his bed, heart pounding. But his half-finished math homework, with its neat rows of equations, lay exposed on his desk, bathed in the soft glow of his lamp. Here's the thing. When the robbers crept into his room, planning to move quietly, they saw the light. They saw the open book and the homework. They saw proof someone was awake, right there. Thinking they'd been spotted, or an alarm would sound, they panicked and ran. His homework, a simple task, became a silent guardian. This is a bit like how a single tiny seed holds the future of a giant oak tree. You can't see the forest in the seed, but it's there, waiting. Or think about a tiny spark in a lab. It might just be a flicker, but it can lead to a huge scientific discovery. The world is full of hidden connections, where something small ends up important. So, it makes you wonder, doesn't it? What if the things we do every day, even the boring tasks, are part of a bigger story? Maybe our ordinary moments hold unexpected power, ready to shape tomorrow in ways we can't guess. Perhaps your own homework has a secret strength. The artist who used his own blood in paintings. Have you ever worked so hard on a drawing or a story that it felt like a piece of you went into it? Imagine taking that feeling even further, much further. History tells us about artists who did just that. They used their own blood as paint. This isn't a horror story, but a deeply human one. Here's the thing. For some artists, regular paint wasn't enough. They wanted their art to be an undeniable part of themselves. They wanted it to hold their very life force. Blood, after all, carries who we are. It's a powerful, ancient symbol of life, of sacrifice, and of personal identity. When an artist chose to mix their blood with pigments, or even use it directly on the canvas, they were saying, this isn't just a picture. This is me. This is my life. Poured onto the canvas, it made the art utterly unique, tied to them forever. Think about it like this. When you finish a really challenging project at school, maybe a science fair model or a complex essay, you feel a deep connection to it. You put your time, your thoughts, your energy into it. It has your fingerprints all over it, even if you didn't literally touch it with your finger. Now, imagine a painter feeling that same intense connection, but pushing it to a level where they use a piece of their actual physical self. It's a way to make the artwork more than just an image. It becomes almost like a living part of the artist themselves. It's a raw, honest expression that reaches for something beyond normal understanding, and that's why it matters. This extreme act makes us pause. It asks us to consider what art truly is, and how far someone might go to tell their story or share their soul. It shows the incredible depth of human emotion and the profound lengths people will reach to be understood, to truly leave a mark that is uniquely and profoundly theirs. It's a quiet reminder that sometimes the strangest acts, born from deep personal need, can hold the deepest meanings. The mystery of the Roanoke colony. Imagine waking up one day, and everyone you know, everyone in your town, has simply vanished. No goodbyes, no notes, just ... emptiness. That's a bit like the true story of the Roanoke colony. Back in the late 1500s, a group of English settlers sailed across the ocean. They came to what is now North Carolina, hoping to build a new life, a new home. John White, their leader, left them there to go back to England for supplies. He promised to return quickly, but a long war in England kept him from coming back for 3 whole years. Can you imagine waiting that long, thinking of their families, knowing they were waiting? When White finally returned in 1590, the settlement was silent. The houses were taken apart, not destroyed, but carefully removed. Defenses were down. There were no people anywhere. The only clue left was a single word, carved into a sturdy tree post, Croatoan, and another, Crow, on a separate tree. This was the name of a nearby Native American island and tribe. Did the colonists move there? Were they taken? Were they in trouble? No one knows for sure. It's like if your entire school building was empty one morning. No students, no teachers, just books left open, and one strange message carved into your desk. That feeling of total confusion and a little bit of fear is what historians have carried for centuries. This isn't just a history puzzle. It's a story about the deep human need to understand, to find closure. We want to know what happened to those families, those children who walked those lands. We wish we could bring them peace, even across hundreds of years. The Roanoke mystery reminds us that not every question has an answer. Some stories stay open, forever whispering in the wind, a quiet challenge to our understanding. And maybe that's okay. Maybe some mysteries are meant to remind us how vast and unknown the past can be. It makes us think about the quiet gaps in time, where lives once were, now just a question mark that lingers. The great eruption that changed weather globally. What if a single moment, far away, could reach across oceans and change your everyday life? Picture this. In 1815, a mighty volcano named Mount Tambora, located in Indonesia, exploded with a force so huge it was almost beyond imagination. This wasn't just a local event. It shot billions of tons of ash, dust and gases high into Earth's atmosphere, forming a vast unseen veil around the globe. This veil didn't just hang there. It acted like a filter, dimming the sunlight, blocking out some of the sun's warmth that usually reaches us. So, the next year, 1816, became known as the year without a summer in many parts of the world. In places like New England and Europe, frosts hit in July, crops failed, people starved, families struggled just to survive, wondering why the world had suddenly turned so cold and grey. They didn't have the science we have now to understand that a faraway volcano was the cause. For them, it was an unfathomable mystery, a profound shift in the natural order that brought widespread fear and uncertainty. Think about how a single, dirty window can change how much light gets into your room, making everything a little darker, a little colder. Now imagine that on a planetary scale. This one event pushed people to be creative, though. Without horses to ride, many died from lack of feed. Someone invented a type of early bicycle. Writers, like Mary Shelley, stuck inside during endless gloomy days, found inspiration for stories that still chill us today. Like Frankenstein. It makes you wonder, doesn't it, how something so far away, so wild, could ripple through every single life, changing history, pushing invention, and even sparking nightmares. It reminds us that the Earth is alive, and we are all part of its grand, unpredictable story, connected in ways we often don't even see. We are so tiny, yet our world is so deeply interconnected. The spy who became a movie star. What if your life was a carefully crafted secret, a story you told the world that wasn't true? Imagine living a double life, not for a short time, but for years, always in the shadows. This is the heart-wrenching reality for some spies. Their whole existence becomes a constant performance, designed to deceive. Think about it. A person is asked to become someone else entirely. They learn new names, histories, ways of speaking, even new dreams. It's like an actor preparing for a role, but the stage is the real world, and the stakes are life or death. The pressure must be immense, like holding your breath underwater for too long. You build a new personality, layer by layer, until the person you once were feels like a distant memory, a whisper in your mind. Here's the thing. Sometimes, the made-up life takes an unexpected turn. Sometimes, that fake person, created for espionage, somehow finds fame. Maybe they become a writer, a musician, or even a movie star, in an astonishing twist. The identity meant to hide them, to make them invisible, suddenly shines bright. Imagine the heavy irony. The person whose life depended on being a secret is now celebrated, recognized by millions, for the character they invented. It's like pretending to love a certain band for a school project. Then suddenly that band gets famous, and everyone thinks you're their biggest fan, forcing you to keep the act forever. The line between who they truly are and who they pretend to be gets incredibly blurry. It makes you wonder, when does the mask become the face? When does the performance become reality? What must it feel like to be applauded for a life that was never truly yours, knowing the real you is still hidden, still silent, still watching from behind the eyes of a stranger? It's a profound thought, reminding us that sometimes the most unbelievable stories are the ones quietly unfolding in the most hidden corners of history. Caligula, the emperor who declared war on the sea. Have you ever felt so utterly frustrated, so powerful, that you wished you could just command the world around you to obey? Imagine having armies ready to do your bidding, no matter how strange. This is a story about Caligula, a Roman emperor whose time in power became an unsettling lesson in what happens when someone has everything and hears no from no one. Among his wild acts, none is more bewildering than his famous war on the sea. After a military campaign didn't go as planned, Caligula led his army to the shores of Gaul, modern-day France. Instead of fighting an enemy, he ordered thousands of soldiers to line up on the beach. Then, in a moment of strange madness, he commanded them to attack the ocean. Yes, he told them to strike the waves with their spears, as if the water were a rebellious foe. He even had them gather seashells, calling them spoils of victory. Imagine trying to punish the endless, roaring waves. This wasn't just a silly act. It speaks deeply about the dangers of absolute power. When a person holds such unchecked authority, when every whim is indulged, their grip on what is real can twist. It's like hitting your video game controller when it glitches. But truly believing that would change the game's rules for you. Caligula, it seems, believed his will could bend even mighty nature. It makes us quietly reflect on our place in this vast world. The ocean, with its deep mysteries and unstoppable tides, cares nothing for human commands or imperial pride. It moves according to its own ancient ways. Caligula's bizarre war gently reminds us that some forces are truly beyond our reach, far greater than any person, no matter how mighty. It's a soft whisper from history. True wisdom lies in understanding the profound limits of our own human power. The discovery of Tutankhamun's curse. Have you ever wondered if some old stories hold a deeper secret? A whisper of something truly unexplainable. Like when strange things happen right after a big moment, and you can't shake the feeling it's all connected. Back in 1922, something similar seemed to unfold when brave explorers unearthed the forgotten tomb of a young Egyptian pharaoh. His sacred resting place had been untouched for thousands of years, brimming with treasures that seemed to glow with ancient light. But soon after, a powerful and unsettling idea began to spread. A curse. When archaeologist Howard Carter, alongside Lord Carnarvon, finally gazed into that incredible chamber, it must have felt like looking through a window into another time. Gold, jewels, silent statues, all lay undisturbed. Yet, just months later, Lord Carnarvon, the man who funded the search, suddenly fell ill and passed away. Then, strangely, other individuals connected to the discovery also started to face a string of misfortunes or untimely deaths. People began to whisper, eyes wide, about a terrible curse. They believed the ancient Egyptians had placed it there, a solemn warning to protect their pharaoh's eternal sleep from intruders. Think about it this way. Maybe you've had a really important test, and you wear a specific shirt you think brings you luck. If you do well, you might feel the shirt worked. But if you don't, you might wonder if you should have worn a different shirt. It's how we try to link events, to find a pattern or a hidden reason, especially when something big or sad happens that we can't quite understand. The idea of the curse offered a mysterious, grand explanation for a series of heartbreaking events. It makes us feel the weight of those moments, the hope, the fear, and the enduring power of human stories. Was there truly a curse? A magical protection reaching across millennia? Or was it simply a string of unrelated events, made into something more dramatic by the sheer wonder of the tomb's discovery? Perhaps the real magic wasn't a curse at all, but our own deep human need to make sense of the unknown. Two craft tales so compelling they help us grapple with life's profound mysteries. The quiet fear, the wonder, the sadness, they became woven into a legend that still makes us pause and contemplate the unseen forces of belief. Even today, a war fought with balloons and pigeons. Can you imagine a war fought not with rockets or internet messages, but with balloons and tiny birds? It sounds like a made-up story, right? But here's what happened in real life. During the siege of Paris in 1870, the city was totally surrounded by enemy forces. No one could get in or out. The whole city was locked in a giant cage, cut off from the world. People inside Paris were desperate. They needed to send news, get supplies, and tell their loved ones outside that they were still alive. So, they looked up at the sky. They started using hot air balloons. Brave pilots would float over the enemy lines, carrying letters, messages, and even a few people escaping the trapped city. It was incredibly dangerous, floating silently, hoping not to be shot down. Each balloon carried thousands of hopes. But how did messages get back into Paris? That's where the pigeons came in. These amazing birds were trained to fly back home, into the city. Imagine writing a message, then shrinking it, super small with special photography, like a tiny postcard you can barely see. This tiny message was tied to a pigeon's leg. These feathered messengers would then brave the journey, flying high, carrying critical news, sometimes the only connection. This isn't just a quirky fact. Here's the thing, it shows us something deep about humans. When everything feels lost and modern ways fail, people will find a way to communicate, to hope, to survive. It's like when your internet goes out at home, and suddenly you can't text your friend, or watch your favorite show. You might feel totally disconnected. Now, imagine that feeling, but for an entire city, for months, and your only way to send a message is with a bird. It makes you think about how important it is for us to connect, even today. We have phones and computers, but that old need to share our stories, to know we're not alone, it hasn't changed. The balloons and pigeons might be gone, but the spirit of reaching out, no matter the odds, that still flies with us. It's a quiet reminder of human courage and ingenuity when faced with impossible challenges. The town where everyone was a twin. Have you ever stopped to wonder what makes you uniquely you? Your laugh, your thoughts, the way you see the world. Now, imagine a town where almost everyone shared a face, a place where looking in a mirror might feel like you're seeing your neighbor, because so many people were twins. This isn't a story from a fantasy book. It's a real, strange truth from a small town in Brazil called Candido Godoy. For a long time, this town had way more twins born than anywhere else. We're talking 10 times the normal rate. People didn't know why. Was it something in the water? A secret in their family lines? Scientists even studied it, trying to figure out this amazing mystery. But here's the thing that really makes you think. What would it be like to grow up there? Imagine you and your best friend both showing up to school in the exact same outfit, every single day. You might laugh it off, but what if your face, your voice, even your family stories, were so similar to someone else's that people often mixed you up? For the twins in Candido Godoy, this was their normal. They were seen as the twins more often than as their own individual names. And that's why it matters. It reminds us how much we value being ourselves. We all want to stand out, to have our own ideas, our own path. Like when you're picking an avatar in a video game, you want it to look special, different from everyone else's. But when you have a reflection walking around, someone who shares so much with you, it makes you think about where your own self truly begins. Even with identical DNA, your experiences, your choices, those are yours alone. This town, full of mirrored lives, makes us quietly consider the amazing truth of our own individual journeys. It shows us that even when faces are the same, the spirit inside each person is always wonderfully unique. The time a volcano blew up an island. Have you ever wondered how truly powerful our planet is? Sometimes, the ground we stand on, the very land that feels so solid, can change in an instant, in ways that are hard to imagine. Picture an entire island, a place with trees and beaches, just disappearing, not sinking slowly, but being torn apart, violently, by forces deep within the earth. This is what happened with a volcano named Krakatoa, back in 1883. It wasn't just an eruption, it was an event that shook the entire world. For months, it rumbled, a deep, restless breathing from beneath the sea, and then, one day, it let out a series of explosions so loud, they were heard thousands of miles away. Think about the loudest thunderclap you've ever heard, or the most powerful concert speaker. Now, imagine that sound reaching across continents, so powerful it caused eardrums to burst in people far, far away. The volcano basically blew itself apart, shattering the island it once was. It turned daylight into darkness for days, filling the sky with ash and dust. Giant waves, called tsunamis, crashed onto nearby coasts, sweeping away everything in their path. It shows us how something that seems so permanent, like a piece of land, can hold a hidden energy, a pressure building over time, until it can no longer be contained. It's like when you shake a soda bottle too much, and all that fizz builds up, ready to erupt. The Earth does this, but on a scale we can barely grasp. And that's why it matters. It reminds us of nature's vast, incredible power, a power that shaped our world and continues to shape it. It makes you feel small, but also fills you with a quiet wonder for the planet we call home. We learn to respect these ancient forces, knowing that sometimes the Earth tells its own stories, louder and stranger than any we could invent. The architect who built a city in the desert. Have you ever imagined building your own perfect world? exactly how you think it should be. A pharaoh named Akhenaten, thousands of years ago in ancient Egypt, didn't just imagine it. He actually tried to build it. He saw the world around him, with its many gods and old traditions. He felt deep in his heart that something needed to change. He believed fiercely in one true God, the Aten, represented by the glowing sun disk. So, he decided to create a whole new city, far from the old ways. Just for this singular belief, think about the courage that must have taken to leave behind everything familiar, all the ancient temples, the powerful priests, and say, "My vision is different." He chose a barren stretch of desert, a blank canvas untouched by other gods. He named it Akhenaten, Horizon of the Aten. For years, thousands of workers poured their lives into this dream. They built grand temples, royal palaces, countless homes. Every stone was laid to honor this one god and this one man's intense, personal vision. It was a city born purely from one person's deep, unwavering conviction. It's a bit like when you have a brilliant idea for a big school project. You're the only one who truly sees it, and you have to convince everyone to help you build it from the ground up. You pour your energy into shaping every detail, hoping others will eventually see the beauty in your creation. That kind of singular drive is what pushed Akhenaten. But here's the thing about dreams so grand, especially when they depend so much on one person's vision. Sometimes they are fragile. Akhenaten's city thrived for a short time, a breathtaking monument to his powerful belief. But after he died, his successors tried to erase it from history, almost as if Akhenaten had never existed. It makes you wonder about the mark we leave behind in the world, and how much of our deepest hopes truly last through time. The unsinkable woman who survived 3 shipwrecks. Have you ever wondered about true resilience, the kind that lets you face huge challenges, not just once, but again and again? History shows us people whose lives seem impossible, making us wonder about our own hidden strengths. Meet Violet Jessup, known as the unsinkable woman. She wasn't a fictional hero. She was a real person, a brave stewardess, a nurse on grand ocean liners. Her life truly shows us a quiet, remarkable strength. Her incredible journey began in 1911. She was aboard the RMS Olympic when it crashed. Violet survived. Then came the unbelievable. In 1912, she worked on the RMS Titanic. When it struck an iceberg, she helped passengers and made it through that famous disaster. But her story still wasn't over. During World War I, she served as a nurse on the HMHS Britannic. In 1916, this huge ocean liner sank after hitting a mine. Again, through terrible danger, Violet survived. Imagine facing such immense destruction 3 separate times. What does that do to a person? Her experience isn't just about luck. It speaks to a deep, stubborn, quiet resilience that emerges when everything else falls apart. Think about a really hard math problem. You might feel like giving up, but then, a small spark inside pushes you to try one more time. That's a little like the strength Violet showed. Her journey is more than just tales of shipwrecks. It's about a human spirit that refused defeat. No matter how many times fate tested her, we all carry this quiet power. Maybe everyone has their own unsinkable quality, a strength for our own difficult moments. The man who invented the world's first computer game. Have you ever wondered about the very first time someone looked at a giant, humming machine and thought, what if this could play asterisk? It's a question about imagination, about seeing beyond the numbers and calculations to something human, something fun. Back in the 1950s, computers weren't sleek phones in our pockets. They were huge rooms full of blinking lights and wires, used for serious science or military work. People often saw them as cold, logical brains, far from anything playful. But then, one man, William Higginbotham, had a different idea. He was a physicist, working on important, heavy stuff like atomic energy. He saw these machines, and he wondered if they could do more than just crunch numbers. He wanted to show people that computers weren't scary or boring, but tools that could bring joy, even connection. So, he created Tennis for Two. It wasn't a fancy game like we know today. It was just a bright dot bouncing back and forth on a small screen, representing a tennis ball, and 2 lines for rackets. You turned a knob and pushed a button to hit the ball. Think about playing catch with a friend. It's simple, right? Just a ball, 2 people, and a space. But in that simple act, there's a connection, a shared moment, a bit of friendly competition. Tennis for Two was like that. It took the powerful, serious world of early computing and distilled it down to a simple, human interaction. It showed that even the most complex technology could be used for something as basic and wonderful as play. It reminds us that sometimes the most important inventions aren't about building bigger or faster machines, but about finding new ways for us to connect, to laugh, to simply be together, even if it's just 2 dots on a screen. It's a quiet reminder that at the heart of all our creations, there's often a deep, human wish for joy. The great escape through a tunnel made with spoons. Have you ever wondered what people can achieve when everything is stacked against them, when hope seems almost gone? It sounds like a wild movie, but sometimes, real life is stranger than any story we make up. Imagine being trapped, with only basic things around you. What would you do? How would you find a way out? This is a true story, a quiet legend, about prisoners who refused to give up. They didn't have big tools, no drills or dynamite. What they had was much stronger, an unbending will to be free and ordinary spoons. Each day, with these small metal kitchen tools, they began to dig, one scrape at a time, one spoonful of dirt, then another. This wasn't just about strength, it was about incredible patience. It was about believing that freedom was worth fighting for. Inch by painful inch. Think about trying to empty a huge bathtub using just a tiny medicine spoon. It feels pointless at first. You scoop a little water, and the tub still looks full. But if you keep going, day after day, that tiny spoon slowly makes a huge difference. That's what these prisoners did. Each tiny scrape was a silent act of defiance, a whisper of hope in the quiet despair of their prison. They weren't just moving dirt. They were slowly carving away their confinement. This amazing effort shows us something deep about being human. It tells us that even when everything is taken, the spirit to survive, the dream of freedom, can never truly be crushed. It's a quiet reminder that the biggest achievements often start with the smallest, most determined steps, and it teaches us that hope, held on too tightly, can carve a path even through solid earth, leading us to a light we once thought impossible to reach. A president who saved his own life from assassination. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to face danger unexpectedly, to have just a split second to react, and that reaction changes everything? History shows us moments so wild, they seem like a movie, but they are real. This is a story about a former president, Theodore Roosevelt, and an unbelievable day in 1912. He was about to give a big speech in Milwaukee. A man in the crowd suddenly shot him. Imagine, one moment you're preparing to speak, the next, a bullet hits you. Most people would fall, panic, or be rushed to the nearest hospital. But Theodore Roosevelt didn't do any of that. The bullet struck him, but it didn't pierce his heart. He had something in his coat pocket that, against all odds, slowed the bullet down. What was it? A very thick, 50-page speech manuscript, and his metal glasses case. These ordinary items, carried by chance, became his unexpected shield. It's like when you drop your phone, and it lands perfectly on a soft rug, saving it. Just a moment of luck, or something more. Even with a bullet lodged inside him, Roosevelt insisted on giving his speech. For over an hour, he spoke, blood slowly staining his shirt. He knew he was hurt, but he felt it wasn't serious enough to stop him. He famously declared, "It takes more than that to kill a bull moose." His determination and willpower pushed him through. This wasn't just about surviving. It was a refusal to let violence win. This story makes you think about how sometimes small, random things can play a huge role in our lives. A speech, a pair of glasses, things we never think twice about, can become protectors. It reminds us that life holds quiet, unbelievable moments. Courage isn't always about grand actions, but also about holding your ground, even when life hits hard. It shows how even in tough times, there's unexpected strength, not just in people, but in the most ordinary things. The real history of zombies and voodoo. Have you ever thought about the zombies we see in movies, shambling and brainless? It's a scary image, for sure. But here's the thing, the true story of zombies, and the voodoo religion connected to them, is much more haunting and heartbreaking than any movie could be. It's a tale born from deep pain and the fight for freedom. This story begins in Haiti, a place with a history tied to slavery. When people were stolen from their homes in Africa and forced into brutal labor, they brought their beliefs and traditions with them. Voodoo, or Vaidu, as it's properly called, is a rich and complex religion. It's about connecting with spirits, nature, and community, finding strength and hope even when life is incredibly harsh. But the cruel reality of slavery twisted some of these ideas. For those enslaved, the worst fear wasn't just dying, It was losing their very self, their will, their mind. Imagine being so utterly controlled, so completely owned, that you felt like an empty shell. Your body moved, but your spirit, your thoughts, your choices, they were gone. This terrible idea, this ultimate loss of self, is where the concept of the zombie truly comes from. It was a person without a soul, forced to work endlessly. A fate worse than death for many. Think about how you feel when you're really tired after a long day at school, or when you have so much homework you just go through the motions. You're physically there, but your mind might feel numb, distant. Now, imagine that feeling, but stretched out over an entire life, with no escape. That's a tiny glimpse of the horror implied by the original zombie concept. It was a metaphor for the profound dehumanization of slavery. So, when we think of zombies, let's remember their real origins. They tell a story not of monsters, but of unimaginable suffering, of people whose humanity was stolen. But they also speak of the incredible power of the human spirit, that even in the darkest times, searched for freedom, for dignity, and for a way to reclaim what was lost. The town that disappeared under sand dunes. Have you ever thought about how fragile our world can be? How quickly things can change? Imagine a whole town, buzzing with life, then slowly, quietly, it simply disappears. This isn't a ghost story, or a magical trick. This is a story about the relentless, silent power of sand dunes. For centuries, people built their lives, their dreams, their families in towns that sat too close to the wild, moving sands. They had shops, homes, streets where children played. But the desert, with its vast, endless ocean of sand, had other plans. It wasn't a sudden flood or a dramatic earthquake. No, this was far more patient, more insistent. The wind would pick up, carrying tiny grains, dropping them, one by one, year after year. Think about it like this. Have you ever been at the beach and buried a small toy under a little pile of sand? You can still find it, right? But what if the wind kept blowing, adding more and more sand, day after day, week after week? Eventually, that toy would be so deep, so covered, you'd never know it was there. That's what happened to these towns. Windows filled with sand, then entire rooms. Houses became hills, then valleys of dunes. The laughter faded, replaced by the whistle of the wind. It's a strange, sad thought. All those lives, all those memories, now just buried beneath shifting hills of sand. It teaches us something profound about time and about nature. Even the strongest buildings, the busiest places, can be gently, slowly reclaimed by the earth. It reminds us that nothing truly lasts forever in the way we expect. But it also shows us that the earth holds secrets, waiting for the right moment, perhaps, to whisper them back to us. It makes you feel small, but also connected to something much larger and older than yourself. The enduring, quiet pulse of our planet. The spy who never existed but saved lives. Have you ever thought about how a story, a complete made-up tale, can become so real it changes everything? Picture this. It's the middle of World War II, a time when the stakes were impossibly high, and every decision meant life or death. The Allied forces, fighting against a terrible enemy, needed to invade Sicily, an island, but they had to trick Hitler's army into looking the other way. They needed a diversion, something big enough to move entire armies. So here's what happened. They came up with an idea so strange, it sounds like something from a movie. They created a spy who never actually existed. They found a body, dressed it carefully in a British Marine officer's uniform, and gave him a fake name, Major William Martin. This wasn't just a costume. They gave him a whole fake life. His pockets were filled with fake love letters, theater ticket stubs, and even an engagement ring bill. But the most important part, he carried secret documents that claimed the Allies were planning to attack Greece and Sardinia. Asterisk, not asterisk, Sicily. They put this body, this carefully crafted lie, into the ocean near Spain, hoping it would wash ashore and fall into German hands. And it worked. The Germans found Major Martin, believed he was a real fallen spy, and swallowed the fake plans whole. They moved their troops, their tanks, and their planes away from Sicily, right where the real invasion was headed, and sent them to Greece instead. Think about how powerful that is. It's like when you hear a rumor at school, and even if it's totally made up, people start acting like it's true. Or how a magician makes you believe something impossible is happening right in front of your eyes. This was a magic trick on a global scale. This spy, a ghost of a person, saved countless real lives. Because of this incredible deception, Thousands of soldiers were spared from battle, their futures untouched by conflict. It shows us that sometimes a carefully placed lie, born out of desperate hope, can become one of the greatest acts of heroism. A silent, unseen hero who never breathed a single breath changed the course of history and brought peace a little closer. A cookbook that was actually a code book. Have you ever thought about how secrets are kept, not just whispered in class, but really hidden, right out in the open? Imagine a book full of recipes for cakes and stews. Looks harmless, right? But here's the thing. Sometimes, these everyday items, like a simple cookbook, can hold the most vital secrets. During wartime, or when people needed to communicate without being caught, they sometimes turned ordinary things into hidden messages. A cookbook wasn't just about baking. It became a language only a few understood. Think about times when freedom was fragile, when speaking your mind could put you in danger. People still needed to share important information, to warn others, or to plan for a better future. They couldn't just send a text or an email. So, they got clever. They used codes, but not always fancy, complicated ones. Sometimes, the code was in how you read a page, or which words you noticed. It's like a secret handshake for your eyes, a way for minds to connect, even when walls stood between them. This shows how strong the human spirit is, how determined people are to connect and be free. It's a bit like when you and a friend have an inside joke. Someone else hears you, but they don't get it. You both know what the pineapple incident really means, but to anyone else, it's just words. Or maybe you've used a secret code with your sibling, pointing to the fifth word on every third line of a favorite storybook to spell out a message. That's how a cookbook code might work, innocent on the surface, but full of meaning for the chosen few. It reminds us that even in the darkest times, humans find ways to share hope and plans. It shows us the power of words and how they can be twisted, hidden, and then revealed again to shine a light. A simple book of recipes can hold stories of bravery, of quiet resistance, and the deep, silent bonds between people trying to make a difference. It makes you wonder what other everyday objects might be hiding extraordinary truths, just waiting for the right person to see them. The boy who became a king at 9 years old. Have you ever thought about what it would be like to be in charge of everything? Not just your room, or what's for dinner, but an entire country. Imagine being only 9 years old. That's about 4th or 5th grade for most of you. What were you doing at that age? Probably playing games, learning new things, maybe grumbling about homework. Now, imagine someone your age, or even younger, being told, "You are the leader. You are the king of a mighty land." This isn't a fairy tale. It happened thousands of years ago, in ancient Egypt. A boy, Tutankhamun, became pharaoh when he was just 9. Think about that for a moment. 9 years old. He wasn't old enough for a bike without training wheels, perhaps, yet he was expected to rule an empire. Priests, generals, advisors, and servants all bowed before him, waiting for his command. Here's the thing. Even with golden crowns and a throne, he was still a child. He faced huge decisions, managing a kingdom, dealing with politics, performing sacred rituals. It's like being asked to fly a jumbo jet across the ocean without ever having a flying lesson. The weight of that responsibility must have been immense. He couldn't just run and play in the streets. His childhood, in many ways, was taken the moment that crown was placed on his head, and that's why it matters. This story shows how life can place huge burdens on very young shoulders. It makes you think how precious our childhood years are, full of simple joys and learning without the heavy pressure of the world. It reminds us that even grand, powerful figures from history were often just people, facing challenges we can only begin to imagine, sometimes long before they were ready. The Great Moon Hoax of 1835. Have you ever heard something so wild, so unbelievable, that a part of you still wanted it to be true? Imagine that feeling, but in a time when news traveled slower, and the world felt much bigger. That's a bit like what happened in 1835 with the Great Moon Hoax. A New York newspaper, the Sun, published stories claiming an astronomer discovered incredible things on the moon. Not just craters, but forests, rivers, and even living creatures, tiny, winged humanoids called man-bats. For weeks, people across America were captivated. They devoured every word, picturing strange beings flitting among lunar temples. Back then, telescopes were new and exciting, but not powerful enough for such details. Communication was slow, so it was harder to check facts. People wanted to believe in discovery's wonder, in the idea that our universe was even more magical. It tapped into a deep human longing for new frontiers, for proof we weren't alone. Even if that proof came from a newspaper. It's a bit like today when a wild story goes viral online. It's shared countless times before anyone asks, is this actually real? We see a shocking headline or dramatic video, and our emotions jump in before our logic does. We might share it, feeling excited or outraged, only to find out later it was made up. The urge to believe, to share, to be part of something big, can sometimes override the need to question. The moon hoax was eventually revealed as a complete fabrication, a clever newspaper trick to sell more copies, but its echo still whispers to us. It reminds us how easily our hopes and desires can shape what we accept as truth. It teaches us a quiet lesson about looking closer, about asking questions, and about the power of a good story, whether true or not. It makes us wonder what hidden truths or beautiful lies we might still hold on to today. When elephants were used in war, have you ever looked at an elephant and felt that calm strength, that ancient wisdom in their eyes? It's hard to imagine these gentle giants, known for their powerful yet peaceful presence, forced into the chaos of human battles. But for thousands of years, in places like India, Persia, and even across the Alps with Hannibal, elephants became weapons. Imagine a battlefield, dust, shouting, the clang of metal. Then, through the smoke, comes a living tank, an elephant, often armored, carrying soldiers, trumpeting a sound that could shake the ground. Their sheer size and weight could break enemy lines, trampling soldiers and horses. They caused not just physical damage, but deep, chilling fear. This strategy, born from desperation, turned magnificent creatures into instruments of destruction. Here's the thing. People used animals in war for a long time. Horses, dogs, even pigeons. But elephants were different. They were massive, intelligent, and lived for decades. To train them for war meant taking them from their natural lives, teaching them to charge, ignore pain, to fight against their instincts. Think how you might feel if your loyal pet, who just wants to play fetch, was suddenly forced to stand on a scary stage and roar. It's not what they were made for. These elephants, like living battering rams, were caught in human conflicts they couldn't understand. It makes you wonder about the choices people made in the past. To look at such a grand, sensitive creature and see only a tool for war, it's a quiet reminder of how far humans would go, how much of the natural world they would bend, just to gain an advantage. And it leaves you thinking about the untold stories, the heavy steps of those silent giants who carried so much more than just soldiers into battle. The man who built London Bridge. Have you ever stopped to think about how old things eventually get replaced? How a building that stood for centuries might one day be gone, making way for something new? Well, a long time ago, one of the most famous bridges in the world wasn't just torn down. It was actually put up for sale. Not a model, not a picture, but the actual London Bridge, piece by piece. Imagine that. This wasn't the very first London Bridge, which had houses built right on it, but a stone bridge that had stood for almost 150 years. It had seen horse-drawn carriages, people hurrying to markets, and quiet moments as the River Thames flowed beneath it. But as the world changed, London grew, and the bridge just wasn't big enough or strong enough for modern traffic anymore. It was getting old, and honestly, a bit too narrow for all the cars. It's a bit like when you outgrow your favorite old t-shirt. It still has good memories, but it just doesn't fit anymore, and you need something new. So, in 1968, the City of London decided to sell it. An American businessman named Robert P. McCulloch, who was building a new city in Arizona, saw an opportunity. He bought the bridge for a little over $1 million. Think about that for a second. An actual piece of London, with all its history and stories, shipped across an ocean to be rebuilt in a desert. Each stone was carefully numbered, taken apart, and sent over. It traveled thousands of miles and was then put back together, exactly as it was, in Lake Havasu City. It makes you wonder, doesn't it, how something so deeply rooted in one place can find a new home, carrying its past with it. It reminds us that history isn't just about dates in a book. It's in the physical things, the objects that witness generations. Even when they're moved far away, they still tell a tale. And maybe, in a strange way, that old bridge in Arizona teaches us that the story of humanity, our need to build, to connect, and to move forward, is a constant thing, no matter where we are. The country that went to war over a bucket can. You imagine people fighting a war, a real bloody conflict, all because of something as simple as a wooden bucket. It sounds like a joke, right? But here's what happened in the year 1325, in a place we now call Italy. Two powerful city-states, Modena and Bologna, actually went to battle, and historians often call it the War of the Oaken Bucket. Now, to be clear, the bucket itself wasn't the real reason. It was an old, wooden bucket, one that belonged to Bologna and sat in their town square, probably used to draw water from a well. One night, a group of soldiers from Modena snuck into Bologna, grabbed this bucket, and took it home as a kind of trophy. This might seem silly, but here's the thing. It was about so much more than just a bucket. For years, Modena and Bologna had been rivals. They fought over land, power, and who was more important. Old resentments and anger were already bubbling between them. The stolen bucket didn't cause the war. It just lit a fuse already set. It was an insult, a clear message that Modena was disrespecting Bologna. Think about it like this. Maybe you have a small argument with a friend, say, over who gets the last piece of pizza, but deep down, it's not really about the pizza. Maybe you're already feeling like they don't listen to you, or that you always give in. The pizza just becomes the thing you argue about, while the real problems are underneath. And that's how it was for Modena and Bologna. The bucket was just a symbol, a public challenge their pride couldn't let slide. Many people lost their lives, and for what? To get a bucket back, or to keep it? No, it was for honor, for pride, for the feeling of being right. It shows us how easily anger and old grudges can twist a small event into something much bigger and much sadder. It makes you wonder, what are we really fighting for sometimes? The secret tunnels underneath famous cities. Have you ever walked down a bustling street, the city alive with noise and movement, and wondered what lies hidden just below your feet? It's easy to think of a city as only what we see above ground, but the truth is, many of the world's oldest and most famous cities hold another secret world, woven into their very foundations. Hidden tunnels and forgotten passages twist and turn in the darkness, silent witnesses to history. These aren't just old pipes or subway lines. These are places built for stealth, for escape, for keeping big secrets. People dug them by hand, sometimes over hundreds of years, for reasons both desperate and hopeful. Think of a queen escaping danger, a secret society meeting in the shadows, or even just people moving goods unseen. Every dark corner, every cold stone, seems to hum with the echoes of whispers and hurried footsteps from long ago. It's like the city itself has a hidden heart, beating silently beneath the noise. Here's the thing. Our lives can be a bit like these cities. On the outside, we present ourselves, what everyone sees, but inside, we have our own hidden paths, our secret thoughts, and feelings that we don't always share. These are the parts of us that run deep, sometimes influencing everything we do, even if no one else knows they're there. Just like a city's hidden tunnels shaped its past, our inner world shapes who we are, often in ways that others might never guess at. So, when we think about these secret tunnels, it's not just about old dirt and stone. It's a quiet reminder that the world, and even people, often have layers we don't immediately see. There's always more going on, more history, more feeling, just waiting to be sensed. If we only take a moment to look a little deeper, the past is never truly gone. It just finds new ways to exist beneath the surface. The day the sky turned black from a chemagen, for a moment, looking up at noon, expecting the bright sun, but instead seeing only darkness, not night, but a strange heavy gloom that swallows the light. What would that feel like? Sometimes, history gives us moments like this, moments when the world changed in an instant, not because of people, but because of the earth itself. We're talking about volcanoes so powerful, they don't just erupt with fire and rock. They blast huge amounts of ash and dust high into the atmosphere, miles above us. Here's the thing, when enough of this ash gets up there, it can stay for months, even years. It spreads around the globe, like a thick, silent blanket. It actually blocks out the sunlight. Not completely, but enough to make day feel like twilight, or even deeper shadow. Records tell us about times when people woke up, lit their lamps, and wondered if the sun would ever truly shine again. They described crops failing, temperatures dropping, and a deep, unsettling fear settling over everything. It wasn't just a day. Sometimes, it was a season, or even a year. Without real summer. Think about being in a room where someone's just blown out a candle. and you can see the smoke filling the air. It's hard to see clearly, right? Now, imagine that on a scale so massive it covers countries, even continents. The tiny particles are everywhere, scattering the light, absorbing it, making the world seem muted and eerie. It makes you realize how much we depend on simple daylight, on the sun just doing its job. And that's why it matters. These moments in history show us how fragile our normal life can be. We take the blue sky and warm sun for granted, but nature, in its raw power, can remind us just how small we are, and how much we rely on the world staying predictable. It makes you think about light, not just as something that lets us see, but as a promise, a comfort, something we deeply need. When the sky turns black from ash, it's more than just a lack of light. It's a profound quietness, a moment when the world holds its breath. The treasure map that led to nothing. What have you spent years, perhaps your entire life, chasing a powerful dream? You clutch a map, worn and creased, marking a clear X where something incredible waits. You pour your spirit into the search, pushing through jungles, braving wild oceans, all guided by this one precious paper. But here's the problem. What if, after all that effort, that X marks absolutely nothing? Just an empty space, a hollow echo of a grand promise. This isn't just a made-up pirate tale. History is full of people who followed what they thought were certain paths to amazing riches or huge discoveries, only to find an empty promise. Think about the enduring legend of El Dorado, the fabled city of gold. For centuries, brave explorers ventured deep into South America, driven by exciting tales of streets paved with pure gold. They found incredible new lands, yes, and met different cultures, but the shining city itself, it was never there. The vivid map in their minds, passed down through whispers and hopes, led them on journeys beyond imagining, but never to the legendary treasure. That invisible X was just a story, and that's why it matters. It's a bit like when you're really excited for a new video game or a movie everyone is talking about. You count down the days, imagine all the cool parts, build it up in your head to be the best thing ever. Then, finally, you play it or watch it, and it's just okay. It doesn't match the grand, perfect vision you had. The promise, the anticipation, was so much bigger than the actual thing. That feeling of a letdown can be surprisingly deep. So, what can this quiet kind of heartbreak teach us? It reminds us that sometimes, the journey itself becomes the real discovery. Even if the treasure turns out to be only a beautiful dream. The explorers who searched for El Dorado, even without finding gold, saw parts of the world no one else had. They faced dangers and found courage they never knew they had. They learned about persistence and the incredible strength of human hope. Maybe the true treasure was never something buried. Instead, it was something we found within ourselves, forged by the very act of searching, by the courage to follow a map, even one that leads to nothing but the wide, open sky. It's about learning to hold on to hope, even when the X on the map disappears. A ship that was full of gold but never found. Have you ever thought about how some of the greatest treasures aren't in museums, but still out there, lost to the world? It's a strange idea. Imagine a massive sailing ship, heavy with chests of gold coins, sparkling jewels, and priceless artifacts. This ship carried the dreams and fortunes of entire nations. People spent years working, sailing, even fighting, to gather this incredible wealth. Then, one day, it vanished. Not just a little bit, but completely. The ship, the gold, the stories, all swallowed by the vast, deep ocean. Here's the thing about these lost ships. They aren't just old stories. They show us moments when human ambition met the raw power of nature. Think about the Spanish galleons. They sailed centuries ago, carrying gold and silver from newly discovered lands back to Europe. These trips were incredibly dangerous. Storms were fierce, and sometimes other ships were worse. People risked everything for that treasure. But then, a sudden storm, a hidden reef, or an enemy attack could turn all that hope into an underwater mystery. All that hard work, the lives, the dreams, just gone. It's a bit like if you knew your most precious item, maybe a diary or a special gift, was somewhere in your house, but you couldn't remember where, and the house was as big as a city, and mostly dark. You know it exists, you know its value, but you can't touch it. That's how it feels to know these ships, full of incredible riches, rest somewhere beneath miles of water. We know they are there, but the ocean is an amazing keeper of secrets. It asks no questions and tells no tales. So, here's what happens. These ships remain. They become legends, whispers carried on the wind and through history books. They remind us that even the greatest human efforts can be humbled by something far bigger. It makes you wonder, doesn't it, what other amazing things are out there, just beyond our reach, patiently waiting, forever holding on to their quiet, golden secrets. The emperor who thought he was a god. Imagine, for a moment, living in a world where everyone around you bows down, not just to your power, but to the very idea that you are a living god. This wasn't just flattery in some ancient empires. For certain rulers, like powerful Roman emperors, this was their reality. They genuinely believed they were chosen by the heavens, walking among mortals with divine blood running through their veins. Think about the weight of that. To wake up each day and believe you are beyond human laws, beyond human suffering, untouchable. It's a concept that twists the mind, blurring the lines between what is real and what is just constant, overwhelming worship. When everyone tells you you're perfect, how do you see your own flaws? Here's the thing. If every single person you knew, from your family to your teachers, constantly told you you were absolutely perfect, incapable of mistakes, always right, how would that change you? Would you still listen to advice? Would you still see your own errors? Maybe, over time, you'd start to believe it yourself, losing touch with the ground beneath your feet. For an emperor, with immense power and no one to truly question them, this belief could lead to wild decisions, cruel acts, or moments of profound loneliness. To be seen as a god often meant being separated, utterly alone, on a pedestal of your own making. History shows us that even the mightiest crowns can't hold up endless self-delusion. There's a quiet sorrow in imagining someone so powerful, yet so lost in their own greatness, unable to truly connect or truly see themselves. It reminds us how fragile our grasp on reality can be, especially when surrounded by absolute power and constant praise. The war that was started by a dog barking could, a dog's bark, a playful chase, really start a war. It sounds like a tale, but in 1925, between Greece and Bulgaria, a small incident spiraled into a conflict that cost lives. Picture a border, a simple line separating two tense nations. One day, a Greek soldier patrolled. His dog ran across the line, chasing something. The soldier, wanting his dog back, followed, but as he crossed that invisible boundary, a Bulgarian soldier fired. The Greek soldier fell dead. A soldier was dead because a dog didn't know borders. What came next wasn't calm. Greek forces invaded Bulgarian territory. Villages were captured, people displaced. The world watched, stunned, as two nations edged closer to a larger war. The League of Nations, a group for peace, had to step in. This quick escalation is like a tiny spark in a dry forest. That spark seems small, but with dry leaves and strong winds, it becomes a raging wildfire, destroying everything. Our human emotions, like fear and anger, act like those elements. A small misunderstanding, a moment of panic, can quickly become something huge and terrible if emotions take over. This story makes you think. It shows how fragile peace is. It reminds us that even small actions have huge, unforeseen consequences. Often, the biggest dangers aren't grand plots, but the swift, unthinking reactions of people to something small. The real battle is within ourselves, choosing calm over anger, understanding over quick reactions, so peace can last. The city that was lost for centuries. Have you ever thought about how easily things can vanish? Not just a dropped coin, but something huge. What if an entire city, full of life and stories, simply disappeared from the map for hundreds of years? It sounds like something from a made-up adventure, but history is full of places like this. Cities that once buzzed with people, with markets and temples and homes, slowly swallowed by sand or jungle, or simply forgotten by a changing world. It's a strange and quiet kind of forgetting. Imagine a city where people woke up every morning, went to work, shared meals, built great things. Then, slowly, over generations, the paths grew faint, the buildings crumbled, and the forests crept in. Maybe a river changed its course, or a war scattered everyone. The memory of that city faded, like an old photograph bleached by the sun, until it was just a whisper, or nothing at all. For centuries, people walked right over the top of these buried worlds, never knowing what lay beneath their feet. It's a bit like finding a dusty box in your attic that you haven't seen since you were very young. You open it, and suddenly, there are toys, drawings, and pictures you completely forgot existed. Each item tells a story you thought was lost forever. But the city is much bigger, with countless forgotten stories. When explorers finally stumble upon these places again, pushing aside vines or digging through layers of earth, it's like a gasp from the past. A whole world, preserved in silence, waiting to speak again. This idea of a forgotten city reminds us how fragile our own lives and memories can be. It tells us that even the grandest things can be lost to time, but also that history is always there, patiently waiting. It's a gentle whisper that there's so much we don't know, so many secrets still hidden beneath the surface of our world, just waiting for someone to listen. A fake newspaper story that caused panic. Have you ever believed something so deeply, only to find out later it wasn't true at all? Imagine that feeling, but on a massive scale, affecting an entire city. Here's the thing. Sometimes, words printed on a page can seem so real, so official, that our minds just accept them without question. Back in 1835, a New York newspaper published a series of articles that completely captured people's imaginations. The stories claimed that a famous astronomer had found incredible life on the moon, like strange animals, and even human-like creatures with wings. It said there were forests, rivers, and temples up there. People read it, and they believed it. They talked about it in the streets, in their homes, their faces full of wonder and excitement. It was proof of life beyond Earth, printed right there in black and white. But here's the problem. None of it was true. It was all a complete fabrication, a made-up prank by the newspaper to sell more copies. Yet the emotional impact was profound. People were amazed, hopeful, and perhaps a little scared. It was like a friend telling a really convincing story that makes your heart race, only to reveal it was a joke later. That sense of betrayal, or maybe just feeling foolish, settles in, and that's why it matters. This incident showed how easily we can be swayed by what we read, especially when it comes from a source we usually trust. It makes you pause and consider, how much do we truly know, and how much do we just accept because it looks official? It's a quiet reminder to always ask questions, to look a little closer, and to hold on to your own thoughtful understanding of the world. Our minds are powerful, but they can also be tricked if we don't pay attention. The time a cow caused the Great Chicago Fire. Have you ever wondered if the biggest problems can start with the smallest things? Often, we look for huge reasons behind disasters, but sometimes, history whispers a different, unbelievable story. Here's the thing. People used to say the Great Chicago Fire, which burned down much of the city in 1871, all started because of a single cow. Imagine a cow, perhaps kicking over a lantern by accident in a barn. From that small spark, in a city built mostly of wood, fire grew. It roared through neighborhoods, destroying homes, businesses, and lives. Thousands lost everything. The idea it came from a clumsy farm animal feels almost impossible to grasp, doesn't it? We want a villain, a big plan gone wrong, not just a moment of bad luck. This isn't about blaming a cow, of course. It's about how easily things can unravel, how a fragile setup can turn deadly from just one tiny push. Think about building a tower of blocks. One misplaced block, one shaky movement, and the whole thing comes tumbling down. The cow wasn't the only reason the fire grew so huge. Dry weather, wooden buildings, and slow fire response also played a part, but her supposed action was the spark, the first domino. It shows how vulnerable we are, how connected everything can be. A simple creature, living its daily life, became the legendary origin of a city's heartbreak. It makes you pause, thinking about the quiet, unnoticed moments in our lives, and how they might set off unexpected chains of events. We often search for grand explanations, for reasons that make sense. But sometimes, history simply offers a cow and a lantern, reminding us that life's biggest stories can begin with the softest, most surprising whisper. The man who escaped Alcatraz with a spoon. Have you ever felt like something was truly impossible? Like a huge wall stood between you and what you wanted? We all feel that way sometimes. But what if that wall was real, made of stone and steel, surrounded by freezing ocean? This was Alcatraz. Nobody was supposed to escape this island prison. Strong currents, many guards, thick walls. It was the end of the line for criminals. Yet, in 1962, 3 men, Frank Morris and brothers John and Clarence Anglin, tried the impossible. They planned to escape. Imagine their nights, filled with the constant fear of being caught. Every sound meant danger. They worked slowly, secretly. Their only tool, a spoon from the mess hall, sharpened. For months, they chipped at damp concrete around their air vents. Each tiny piece of dust had to be hidden. They built a secret world, making fake paper MCH heads to trick guards, and rafts from raincoats. Think of a huge school project. It seems too big at first, but you work on it a little each day, one small piece after another, and suddenly it's done. These men did that for freedom. We don't know if they made it to shore. The ocean is vast, but here's the thing. They tried. They faced an impossible situation with just a spoon and an unbreakable will. Their story isn't just about escape. It's about hope, the deep human need to be free. It shows us what happens when we refuse to give up, even when everything is against us. It reminds us that the smallest tool, combined with the biggest dream, can sometimes break through the hardest wall. A king who was trapped in a tower and never seen again. Have you ever thought about what it means for someone to just vanish, to be there one day, and then completely gone the next, leaving no trace, no farewell? That's what happened to a young king, Edward V. He was just 12 years old when his father died, making him the next in line for the English throne. But here's the thing. He never really got to wear the crown. Along with his younger brother, Richard, Duke of York, he was sent to live in the Tower of London. It was supposed to be a safe place for them, a royal residence before Edward's big moment. They were seen playing in the Tower grounds for a while. They went about their days, and then, slowly, they weren't seen anymore. The boys, heirs to a kingdom, simply stopped appearing. No one saw them leave. No one saw them die. They were just gone. From the summer of 1483 onwards, their fate became one of history's greatest, most heartbreaking mysteries. For centuries, people have wondered, did their uncle, who became King Richard III, have them killed? Did someone else? Were they secretly spirited away? We simply don't know. It's kind of like losing something really important to you, maybe a beloved pet, or a special locket. You search everywhere, ask everyone, but it's just gone. The worst part isn't just that it's missing, but that you never find out what happened. That feeling of not knowing, that deep void where answers should be, is what makes this story so powerful. The silence around these boys' story speaks volumes. It reminds us that even with all our records, some moments just slip into the dark. History sometimes leaves us with only questions and a quiet sense of loss. Their disappearance shows us how fragile power can be, and how some endings remain forever unwritten, leaving a profound emptiness. The great snail race that gripped a nation. Have you ever thought about how sometimes the smallest, slowest things can become the biggest stories, holding a whole nation's attention? Not a grand battle or a daring invention, but something almost invisible. Picture this, a nation, tired from tough times, needing a reason to smile, to connect. This isn't a comic book story. It's from real life, in England. When life felt incredibly difficult for many, people felt heavy, weighed down by daily challenges. They desperately needed something light, innocent, a gentle escape from harsh reality. And that's when a rather unusual event started to capture their hearts and imaginations. Snail racing. Yes, tiny garden snails, inching along a small track. But here's the thing. It wasn't just a race. It became a profound symbol. Each slow, deliberate movement wasn't just a creature moving. It was a tiny flicker of hope, a shared breath, across an entire country. People gathered around their radios, their ears pressed close, listening intently as announcers described every hesitant slide, every brave antenna twitch. The quiet tension was palpable, shared by thousands. Think about a group project in school. You and your friends have worked so hard on something that might seem small or even silly to others. But for you, it's everything. Every tiny step, every bit of progress, feels like a massive victory, a testament to shared effort. That's how it felt for the nation watching these snails. They poured their hopes and emotions into these slow-moving champions. They chose favorites, whispered encouragement, and found a shared purpose in something so wonderfully simple, yet deeply meaningful. It wasn't about who won quickly. It was about the shared journey, the collective act of watching and hoping together. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What does it truly say about us, about people, that we can find such deep meaning, such collective emotion, in something as quiet and patient as a snail race? Perhaps it shows us that even when the world feels fast, complicated, and overwhelming, the most powerful moments often come from slowing down, from finding wonder and joy in the ordinary, and from sharing a simple, quiet hope with others. It reminds us that sometimes the greatest strength isn't in rushing, but in the steady, determined pace of life itself. Moving forward, one tiny, hopeful slide at a time, together. The doctor who believed in bloodletting for everything. Have you ever felt sick and wished for one simple thing to fix everything? A magic button, maybe. Well, imagine a time when doctors, smart and well-meaning, thought they had that magic button. It wasn't a button though. It was a knife, or sometimes, leeches. This is the story of a powerful belief, incredibly old, that losing blood was the answer to almost every illness. From a pulsing fever to feeling deeply sad, doctors would often recommend bloodletting. They truly believed it would make you better. The idea was that our bodies held for main humors blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. If you were sick, these humors were out of balance. Too much blood, for instance, was thought to cause trouble. So, they let some out. It sounds strange to us now, right? Maybe even a little unsettling. But here's the thing. Back then, this wasn't just a wild guess. It was their science. It was what educated, respected people believed for hundreds, even thousands, of years. Imagine your favorite game console glitches or runs slow. Someone tells you, wipe all your game saves and profiles. That'll fix it. And for a long time, everyone agrees. You might really believe it's the right thing, even if it feels wrong. Think about the quiet fear of a sick person, weak and vulnerable, trusting their life to this painful cure. Think about the doctor, earnest and caring, believing they were truly helping, even as patients often got worse or didn't make it. It's a heavy thought. This history reminds us how fragile our understanding can be. It shows us that even smart people, trying their best, can get things terribly wrong with pure intentions. It makes you wonder what ideas we hold on to today that future generations will look back on with pity and disbelief. It's a quiet lesson in humility, a reminder to always keep learning, to always question, and to never stop searching for truer, kinder ways to heal. The world's first underwater city. Have you ever wondered what it would be like if our homes, our entire town, just slipped beneath the waves? Not in a movie, but in real life. Imagine waking up one day to find your streets, your school, your favorite park, all swallowed by the sea. It sounds like something out of a wild story, but over 5,000 years ago, it actually happened to a real place. Off the coast of Greece, there lies a site called Pavlopit. This isn't a lost legend like Atlantis. It's a true ancient city, discovered by scientists, resting quietly on the seabed. Its buildings and streets are still there, outlined by sand and stone, almost perfectly preserved by the cold, dark water. People lived here, breathed here, created families, and built lives, just like us. They had hopes and fears, daily routines, and friendships. Imagine their shock, their heartbreak, as the very ground beneath them began to sink, slowly or suddenly, until the blue waters covered everything they knew, leaving only silence behind. It's a strange, haunting thought, isn't it? To think that human hands built something so grand and lasting, only for nature to reclaim it entirely, transforming it into an underwater ghost. It's a bit like when you make a really special drawing, something you poured your heart into, and then you leave it outside by accident. The rain comes, blurring the lines, washing away the colors, making it unrecognizable to others. But you still remember the feeling of creating it, the story it told. The ocean remembers Pavlopitri in that same way, holding those memories, those lives, in its silent depths. This submerged city reminds us of our own place in the world. We build, we strive, we dream, but nature always holds an ancient, powerful wisdom, often having the final word. Yet, even in its quiet disappearance, Pavlopitri speaks to us. It whispers about the fleeting beauty of human effort, and the powerful, timeless secrets the earth and sea hold. It makes you wonder what other incredible stories are sleeping beneath the surface, waiting for us to just listen with an open heart. A musician who is also a spy. Have you ever wondered if the people around you are secretly living a totally different life? Like, if your quiet classmate who loves to draw is actually a skateboarding champion after school. History is full of these hidden layers, and sometimes, the truth is far stranger than any story we could make up. Imagine someone whose entire world was built on beautiful music, but their secret life involved dangerous missions and whispered secrets. This is the story of people like Josephine Baker. She was a world-famous singer and dancer, celebrated in Paris during World War II. Her performances were dazzling, full of joy and energy, but beneath the bright lights and applause, she was collecting vital information for the French resistance. She would hide coded messages in her sheet music, or pin secret notes inside her elaborate stage costumes. When she traveled for tours, no one suspected her of being anything more than an entertainer. People saw her as a star, but she was also a brave spy, risking everything for what she believed in. It's a bit like when you have a smartphone. On the surface, it's just a phone for calls and texts, but it can also be a camera, a calculator, a map, or a mini computer for research. One device, so many different functions, some hidden until you need them. Josephine used her fame and talent as a kind of camouflage, a brilliant disguise for her true mission. Her music brought people together, but her hidden work helped fight against injustice. This makes you think, doesn't it, that sometimes the most important work is done in the shadows, by people we might never suspect. It reminds us that courage can look many different ways. It might be loud and proud, like a powerful song, or it might be quiet and unseen, like a hidden message. And maybe, just maybe, everyone has a hidden strength or a secret role they play in the world that we don't always see on the surface. It makes you wonder what quiet heroism might be happening all around us, every single day. The great toilet paper shortage of 1973. Imagine a time when something as simple as ordinary asterisk, as toilet paper suddenly vanished from shelves. What would that feel like? How would you react? This really happened in America, back in 1973. It wasn't because factories stopped making it. Not really. It began with some news stories, a little worry about supply chains and rising oil prices. And then, something truly strange happened. A TV talk show host, Johnny Carson, joked about a news report saying there might be a shortage. He made a light-hearted comment, something to get a laugh. But people heard it, and then, because of that one joke, fear started to spread like wildfire. Millions rushed to stores. They bought huge amounts of toilet paper, far more than they needed, stuffing their homes. This sudden panic created the very shortage everyone feared. The shelves emptied, not because there wasn't enough being produced, but because everyone suddenly believed there wouldn't be. Here's the thing. It's like when one person in a cafeteria thinks the school is running out of a favorite snack, so they grab two. Then their friend sees, and they grab two more. Soon, everyone is rushing to get their share. And even though there was plenty to begin with, the snack runs out almost instantly. The fear of not having enough made it true for everyone. This story isn't just about bathroom tissue or a silly mistake. It shows us how powerful belief can be, how a small whisper of worry can turn into a loud shout of panic, changing reality itself. It makes you think about how easily we can be swayed by fear, and how quickly our everyday comfort can feel fragile. And it makes you wonder what else we take for granted every single day, until it's suddenly gone. Our actions, even small ones, can echo far and wide. The town that was accidentally blown up by its own people. Have you ever thought about how a tiny accident, a small mistake, can lead to something truly heartbreaking? Imagine a bustling port town, full of life and the sounds of ships. One ordinary day, two ships accidentally bump in the harbor. Not a big crash, just an incident. But here's the thing. One of those ships carries a massive amount of explosives. A small fire starts on the damaged ship. People gather on the shore, curious, watching the spectacle, not really understanding the danger growing right before their eyes. Then, everything changes. A blinding flash of light, followed by a roar so loud it rips through the air. The entire town doesn't just shake, it shatters. Homes are torn apart, streets erased, lives changed forever in one terrifying moment. This wasn't an enemy attacking, it was their own harbor, their own people, caught in an unthinkable disaster they unknowingly created. It's a bit like a tiny crack in a window that you ignore. But then a strong wind comes, and suddenly the whole pane shatters, or leaving a small candle burning too close to something flammable. A small oversight, a tiny spark, can become a raging fire, destroying everything. This deeply sad story makes us think about how easily things can go wrong. It reminds us how connected everything is, and how one misstep, one tiny spark of human error, can become something so much bigger than anyone imagined. This story makes us pause. It reminds us to pay attention, to be careful, and to understand that even small actions can have huge consequences. And it shows us the powerful strength of a community that has to rebuild, not from an outside enemy, but from a tragedy born right there at home.